Chapter 1089. This was also the reason why the third male lead could be so unscrupulous. Bojo held onto her shoulder bag with one hand and stuffed her other hand into her pocket. She looked at him silently. Perhaps it was because he had been stared at for too long, or perhaps it was because the young man's eyes were so dark that there seemed to be no end to them. They were as deep as an ancient well, as if he was being stared at by something. For some reason, the third male lead felt that the young man's eyes were a little creepy. It was this feeling that gradually turned into anger. How dare he *** look at him with such a gaze? Did he know the rules? Did he know that every Chinese actor who came here had to respect them? Since he didn't know, he would teach him a lesson. The third male lead smiled at Bojo, the disdain and mockery in his smile obvious. The people around them were still laughing. After less than half a minute, the international director walked over, his face filled with excitement. Come, take a look at the script. I'll get someone to explain the scene to you. Bojo retracted her gaze, her chin nodding. Who is he? You want to get to know Alan. The director laughed. That's great, the two of you have scenes together. His scenes haven't started yet, why don't you get him to explain it to you? Bojo seemed to be thinking about something. She smiled mischievously. Sure. Alan, hey, Alan. The director called out to the third male lead. The person called Alan walked over. He was indeed polite to the director. Even if he was hostile towards someone, he would hide it. The director patted his shoulder. Explain the scene to Joe, this is his first time acting. First time acting. Director, I'm really worried that even if I explain the scene to him, he wouldn't know how to act, Alan said jokingly. But it was obvious that he looked down on Bojo. The other two actors also turned to look at them. One of them didn't approve of Alan's actions. Since the director had chosen the actor, he must have his reasons. Besides, they would only know how the other party would act. Alan obviously didn't think so. The moment he saw that the other party was from China, it was a headache. Even so, there was no need for the people around to stand up for an outsider. After all, their impression of some Chinese actors was that they didn't have many productions, but they liked to show up on the red carpet. It was undeniable that there were still some outstanding actors. But to a certain extent, the person in front of him didn't have any acting skills. Here, acting skills were the deciding factor. The international director frowned and said, "That's because you don't know Joe. He just needs to be himself in this movie. Since that's the case, then I'm indeed worried." Alan would not embarrass the director on such an occasion. He reached out and took out the script. Let me tell him about the scene between us first. The director smiled and patted his shoulder again. Someone called again. The director had no choice but to tell Bojo, "I'll go get busy. Listen to the content and we'll start the rehearsal." All right. Bojo didn't seem to be affected at all. Her lips were curved into a faint smile. In that instant, Chin Mo's shadow could be seen on her. Have you been alone for too long? Even his temperament would be a little similar to that person. After the director left, Alan's expression changed. His face was full of mockery. Oh no, I forgot that you Chinese actors are extremely bad at English. Don't tell me that you can't understand what I'm saying after talking for so long. That would be really awkward. The people around them saw that Bojo didn't have much of a reaction. They thought she really didn't understand. Alan laughed again and placed the script at the side. I really don't understand where the director found such a dumb pig like you. You're wasting our time. Alan. Another actor couldn't stand it anymore and reminded him. Alan saw that the other actor was just a little smaller than him and didn't bother about him. Mind your own business. Right at this moment, the youngster spoke. She was still in the same lazy posture with one hand in her pocket. Her voice was pleasant and slow. "You're the dumb pig." 5 words, calm and indifferent. Those present understood Chinese, so of course, they understood the meaning of this sentence. Alan frowned. "What?" "I said you were." The authentic British accent was filled with an indescribable magnetism. The young man's unique voice was like gurgling water, penetrating Alan's eardrums bit by bit. "I say, you're the stupid pig." She spoke in both English and Chinese. Alan's face was filled with anger. He really looked like a piece of pig liver. After all, he hadn't expected this youngster to not only understand his words, but to even repeat them in 2 languages. This was a slap to his face. "You!" Alan was furious. It was as though he was going to beat someone up. His right hand had already grabbed the youngster's collar. The veins on his arm were popping. His aura was terrifying. His manager held him back. "Calm down, Alan, calm down. This is the person the director brought." Alan gritted his teeth and swung his arm. His eyes were like a venomous snake as he spat out his serpent's tongue. "Just you wait, little brat." Bojo smiled faintly. She reached out to tidy her collar. "Sure, I'll wait." The more she acted like this, the angrier Alan became. The rage burned him to the point where he almost lost his rationality. There was also a Chinese person working behind the scenes. He reached out and pulled Bojo back. Then he turned to the manager. "I'll pull him down for a chat." The manager heaved a sigh of relief and waved his hand. Bojo allowed a person who was almost 30 years old to pull her. That person said, "I know you're angry after hearing what he said. But you have to be careful when you're here. Don't look at him. I heard that he has dealings with people on the American highway. If you provoke him in the filming set, he will still be worried about the director. He won't do anything to you, but it's hard to say in the future. Besides, with your current state, even 3 people wouldn't give him a beating, so we're going to allow him to scold Chinese pigs." Bojo interrupted. The man turned back. There were already some wrinkles at the corner of his eyes. He sighed before saying, "None of us are heroes. It's good to be patriotic, but it's not good to be too reckless outside. I want to retaliate like you. Let's talk about something else. When I first came here, I was tricked. But what could I do? My family's only money was used to send me overseas. Washing dishes here makes more money than in China. It wasn't easy for me to get a job, and I can send money back home every month. If I retaliate, it would mean losing my job. A rich young master like you probably doesn't know how hard it is for a Chinese to find a job in America. Some kind-hearted people will tip you when they see you dressed poorly and treat you well. But most of the time, it's a problem with the system. It's all about survival, do you understand?" Bojo paused after hearing his words. "Why don't you go back?" The man didn't reply. He just shook his head. There wasn't a single person who didn't miss home. But more importantly, they had to support their families. Bojo knew that it was already good enough that he had pulled her away. After all, there were 2 people who didn't even care about her. They were probably worried about getting into trouble. That was normal. But she was the young master of a rich family. She didn't lack money and didn't need to support a family. She just needed to support an almighty. Hence. Bojo glanced up. Her gaze landed on Alan, who had kicked the thing away. Her gaze was icy cold. It was time for some people to swallow their words. The international director was really busy. Otherwise, he would have noticed the abnormality. The other actors who knew about this were worried about the youngster, but they didn't want to get involved. Alan was still watching Bojo from afar. His gaze was bloodthirsty. Someone walked over, wanting to help Bojo. "I didn't expect your English to be so good." It was the local actor who had spoken up for Bojo. "But I have the same reminder." "Really, don't provoke Alan." "Thank you." Bojo had grown up here. She knew there were good and bad people in every country. There was no doubt that bad people had to be beaten up. Other than Bojo, there was another Chinese actor. The actor probably walked through a lot of doors to get the role in his hand. He was standing beside Alan and saying, "Don't make life difficult for people who don't have any qualities. You should know some people who don't know how high the heavens are." Alan didn't like any Huaxia people now, so he didn't appreciate the actor's words. He glared at the actor and sat back in his resting position. The male actor had no choice but to walk over to Bojo. "You should apologize to Alan. Don't you know you're representing China?" Bojo unwrapped a lollipop and placed it in her mouth. When she heard his words, she glanced up and asked calmly, "You still know about face? How refreshing. You. What kind of manners are you?" The actor clenched his fists. Bojo was devilish. "Why are you talking about manners with people who aren't human? Move aside, I don't have time to beat you up." The actor laughed. "Do you know how popular I am in China?" Oh. Bojo arched a brow. "I'm not sure. It seems like your definition of fire is bragging." The male actor's face darkened with anger. "You probably can't imagine how much my fans love me. As you can imagine, there will be fans like idols." Bojo's voice was still lazy. "If not, why would there be someone like you? You sure know how to suck up, but you're the one who doesn't talk about China and its reputation the most." The actor still wanted to say something. The director had already walked over from afar. The male actor could only swallow his words. He pretended that nothing had happened and walked to the side. "Joe, how's your understanding of the script?" From his words, it wasn't hard to tell that this international director couldn't wait for Bojo's audition. Bojo lifted the script in her hands. "I just started." The international director was a little disappointed, but he knew that he had been too impatient. His assistant reminded him in a low voice, "Sir, should we let this actor try on her makeup and costume?" "Right. Could a character act well and have a sense of presence?" Other than skilled acting skills and her own looks, there was another important factor. It was what people in the industry called fixing the makeup. Everyone knew how many characters were ruined by the hands of the stylist. This was a principle that had been taught in movies and television. But there was one thing that a person couldn't handle. Some styles were also important. Even though the director had a lot of say in the production team. But from the looks of Bojo's character, she was the male god in many people's hearts even though she wasn't the male lead. But this character had an unimaginable amount of support online. A mysterious hacker who came and went without a trace, good and evil at the same time. People could only imagine how this character would look like based on descriptions. Indeed, from the height and age, this youngster in front of them fit the description. It was said that the screenwriter of this novel was based on the hacker Z who had been popular in the entire Fifth Avenue back then. They had only heard of that person but had never seen him before. But according to the description of the police, he was indeed around this height and looked very young. But no one knew the details. The screenwriter added in his own imagination and described him as a beautiful youngster with Eastern blood. The original sentence in the novel was described as follows: "The night breeze blew past." The youngster's messy short hair didn't make him dispirited. Instead, it added to his noble aura. He was like an Eastern vampire aristocrat. The pure black windbreaker with a hood covered his face, revealing only the curve of his chin. But that curve was enough to leave people with endless fantasies about his handsomeness, hence, the youngster's appearance was passable. Even in this production team with a superstar, he was exceptionally good-looking. But the assistant felt that the youngster was a little too soft compared to the character he was going to be acting. Would he be able to bring out the aura of the character after he wore the costume? After the assistant's reminder, the director remembered. Oh right, fixing the makeup. Joe, go and put on your makeup and clothes first. You just have to take a look at the script during this time. We'll be going through the scenes later so that you can get used to the rhythm here. It's fine if you can't remember your lines. Bojo smiled and asked, which scene? Which scene? The international director was still hesitant. At the start, he had wanted Joe and An to act together so that he could get used to the scene faster. But now that An had finally found the feeling from the previous scene, he had to act for a while more. He caressed his chin, his fingers moving. Chapter 1090. I think we should look at the makeup before filming, the actor from China said. He glanced at Bojo and pointed out. This role is too important. If the aura isn't strong enough, the audience won't be satisfied and it might affect the box office and reputation. As soon as the words box office and reputation were mentioned, everyone paused. After all, as a filmmaker, to put it bluntly, these two aspects were the most important. The director had spent so much time looking for someone. If the aura wasn't strong enough, it might ruin the original work. There would definitely be a backlash and that was the last thing they wanted. Hence, from a certain perspective, the actor was right. The makeup was the key. But he didn't jump out to speak because of the movie. It was because of what had happened previously. He wanted to vent his anger and at the same time, he could get on Alan's good side. Why not? The director could tell that there was another layer of trouble in his words. He frowned. He had thought that since they were all from China, it would be easier to get along. He hadn't expected this actor to be the troublemaker. Under such circumstances, the other actors watched. She was obviously trying to make the director take a step back. The international director had a temper too. He narrowed his eyes and was about to speak. But Bojo walked to the assistant's side first. She used the youngster's unique voice, pleasant and magnetic. Where do I go to get my makeup done? Ha! The assistant almost wanted to thank the person in front of him for being so sensible. Otherwise, if the director were to flip out, the situation would definitely be awkward. Fortunately, the youngster spoke up in time. Here, come over here. The assistant hurriedly reached out. Bojo followed behind her, the warmth in her eyes gone. The makeup artist was famous in the industry. Honestly, he hadn't expected much from her at the start. But at this moment, when he looked at the youngster again, the dark eyes didn't seem to have any impurities. They were cold and mysterious. He raised a brow and asked the assistant, "What's wrong?" Getting into character early. The assistant could only guess. The aura exuding from the youngster seemed to be changing bit by bit. It was an indescribable feeling, as though there was something mysterious about it. The makeup artist put on the makeup first. When she touched the youth's face, she realized that she didn't need any foundation. After all, the youth's skin was too good. It was as white as jade, and there was a kind of silky coolness when she touched it. It was easy to think of Oriental porcelain. Bojo seemed to have noticed the pause in her makeup artist's words. Bojo lifted the corners of her eyes, the tiny tear mole appearing. What is it? Ahem, nothing. The makeup artist was stunned. He would never admit that at that moment, he was a little dazed. It wasn't rare to see good-looking people in this industry, but it was rare to see someone like the youngster who had a blood-sucking aura. The youth was fair enough. His eyes were very dark. Her eyelashes and the bridge of her nose were impeccably perfect. Especially the youth's lips, which were very pale. The makeup artist suddenly had the thought of doing her makeup seriously. In fact, there was no need to draw much. The eyeliner and the increased brightness of the tiara were all to make the youngster's facial features stand out. One had to admit that some makeup could indeed make people as cold as ice in an instant. When the makeup artist saw the finished product, she couldn't help but widen her eyes. He could not imagine what kind of changes the young man would undergo after he put on the costume. The assistant was still waiting anxiously outside. He didn't know who had mentioned that someone was going to appear in this role online. It was obvious that the response wasn't very good. After all, everyone had a different Hamlet in their heart. Actually, the assistant knew that there would be people who wouldn't be satisfied with this role. But if they had found a famous actor, the opposition might have been smaller. Just like now, the assistant glanced at the comments and rubbed his aching head. What's wrong with getting a Chinese actor? I don't think it's a problem to get a Chinese actor since the person we like is indeed from the East. Isn't this already written in the novel? More importantly, I heard that this actor doesn't have any acting skills and his aura is weak. Weak aura. Oh my God. Isn't this ruining my idol? To be honest, I really hope so. There's no other way. I was going to watch it, but now I've completely lost interest. The comments online would definitely not be good. That was normal. After all, everyone had expectations for the idol in their hearts. As the assistant, it was probably time to remind the director. Hence, she ran over and showed her phone to the director. Someone leaked the news. The director was very smart. He could tell that there was something fishy about it. After all, not many people knew that he had poached Joe to act in the movie. The assistant lowered his voice. It's not a matter of who leaked the news, but whether the actor you found can pass the most basic test. Alan stood at the side and could see how ugly the director's expression was. He glanced at his phone again and smiled smugly. Then, he glanced at the actor standing beside him. Aren't you afraid of dealing with someone who comes from the same place as you? I didn't do anything. I just wanted everyone to know what was going on. Obviously, the actor was a White Lotus. Alan appreciated his sense of attachment to a hero who knew how to adapt to the situation. That was how a Chinese pig should be. The atmosphere was tense. The assistant kept raising her wrist to look at the time. There were too many staff here. Only those who were filming were at other locations. Most of the rest were here, including some of the main actors. The assistant was really worried that the effect would be too bad. When the director, before the assistant could finish analyzing the situation, the moment she looked up, she was completely stunned. Her hand holding the phone also squatted on the spot, and her mouth opened to a certain extent. Every inch of expression on his face was filled with intense amazement. The crowd followed her line of sight. The first thing that came into view was a slender figure in a black trench coat. Gradually, the youth walked out of the darkness. His silver hair was mostly covered by the hood of the coat, and only his face could be vaguely seen. He was handsome, cold, and had a hint of evil. He was wearing a white shirt, which was pulled to one side by the youth. This outfit didn't suppress the youngster. Instead, the youngster controlled it. Most importantly, his eyes were extremely dark and mysterious. When the youngster played with the pure silver USB stick in his hands, he walked towards them. When he glanced up, black feathers flew into the air. Everything behind him seemed to have become a backdrop for the youngster. In the blink of an eye, his soul was destroyed. In that instant, there was only the sound of people gasping. One of the staff clutched his chest in agitation. The other exclaimed in disbelief. Even though some of the main actors didn't express anything, the shock in their eyes proved that the youngster's makeup was flawless. The assistant struggled to find her voice. Director, ha ha ha. The director wasn't a straightforward person. But ever since Bojo came, he laughed more frequently. Now you know, only Joe is suitable for this role. Really? How can they be so similar? How can they be so similar? The assistant was a fan of the original novel. At this moment, she was circling around Bojo. It was as though she had seen her male idol. She wanted to touch him. Who could understand? Alan and the male actor had the ugliest expressions. Both of their expressions changed at this moment. The former clenched his fists unwillingly, a sinister glint in his eyes. The male actor was slapped in the face. After all, he had always been hailed as a stunningly handsome man in China. Right now, standing beside the youngster, he was almost out of the picture. The director was still laughing. The other actors expressed their friendliness towards Bojo. Hey, bro, I can guarantee you that many people will change their opinion of you with this makeup. Bojo smiled lightly. Thank you. We are looking forward to your next performance. It was another local actor. He reached out to shake her hand. Perhaps many people thought that makeup was based on one's looks, but that wasn't the case. If it wasn't for Bojo's character, which gave people a mysterious and noble aura and a pair of playful eyes, they wouldn't have thought that just because they were good-looking, they wouldn't have been acknowledged. But the acknowledgement made Alan extremely unhappy. He couldn't take it anymore. He took a step forward and started to mock her openly. In China, there are too many people who are just good-looking but don't have acting skills. They are still chased by a group of fans. Brother, I have to tell you, that doesn't work here. Actors still have to rely on their acting skills to speak. Bojo stopped playing with the USB. She looked at him and suddenly broke into a smile. That's rare, I agree with you on this point. Actors still have to rely on their acting skills to speak. It's about which country they are discriminating against. Alan narrowed his eyes. The tension made the director frown deepen. Alan, you need to calm down. It isn't suitable for you to act with Joe now. Cancel what we just said. With that, the surrounding people heaved a sigh of relief. After all, if they really used the fight scene, Alan might take revenge. Even if he didn't, the youngster wouldn't be able to take a single punch from him. However, to everyone's surprise, the young man, who had always been smiling faintly, suddenly said, "Don't. Alan wants me to see how he acts in an action scene. I also want Alan to see how we Chinese act in action scenes." At this moment, the director's expression froze. The assistant's expression was one of disgust. "Child, you are asking for trouble, do you know that?" The actors at the side probably wanted to persuade her as well. Alan turned, not allowing the situation to change. "In that case, let's start. Do you need me to write down your lines?" "It's fine. Other than physics, I'm good at reading and memorizing." Bojo's memory wasn't as good as Almighty Chin's, but it was still better than ordinary people. This was a skill that every hacker had to train. Since she had read the script twice, it wasn't hard to remember the 3 lines. The director was worried, his expression darkening. He reached out, wanting to pull Bojo back. But Bojo held onto his wrist. "It's a good chance to test my acting skills." "Assistant. How does this look like you're trying out your acting skills? You're clearly trying to get yourself killed. Don't all good-looking people use their brains? How can you not see that Alan is so hostile towards you? How can someone with such a pure personality survive in this industry? You will definitely die without a corpse." Bojo didn't have to guess to know what the people around her were thinking. But at this moment, her attention was on Alan. Our Lord Joe was thinking about how to beat him to his heart's content. Both of them wanted their team positions. No matter how unwilling the director was, the 2 actors were already in position. He had no choice but to sit beside the camera operator. Right now, he only hoped that Bojo would hide and not let herself get hurt. He couldn't let the actor he had painstakingly found get hurt before the filming even started. However, everyone knew that it was impossible for this matter to end just like that when they saw Alan wiping his hands. They were even worried that the youngster would be crippled by Alan. Everyone, get ready. As a director, this was probably the scene he didn't want to film the most. Action. When the two words fell, Alan wasn't suppressing himself anymore. Alan was no longer repressed. His emotions leaked out faster than his fist. With a ferocious expression, he waved his right arm at the young man. It was so fierce that the director didn't even have time to shout for a stop. The assistant at the side tilted her head. She really didn't want to see her almighty getting beaten up, even if it was an illusion. Hence, she didn't see it. In the next second, the youngster turned sideways. With a wave of her left hand, she pinched the arm that was reaching towards her. Then, she pulled it forcefully. With a sinister smile, the wind blew. Her long legs bent her knees and she hit Alan's stomach fiercely. What was even more shocking was that when the youngster did this action, her right hand was in her pocket the entire time. Which meant that she only used one hand. The black trench coat was rolled up, along with the hat that was hanging down. She was ruthless and extremely cool. But that wasn't the end. Alan wanted to dodge. However, he was pulled back by the youngster. Just like that, she held onto his wrist with one hand and used it as a fulcrum. With a somersault, she threw him out. There was a loud bang. Alan was thrown onto the ground. Just the sound alone was enough to tell how painful it was. Not to mention the twisted expression on his face. The rising dust caused everyone's eyes to widen. The youngster in the black trench coat was extremely nonchalant. She strolled over and looked down from above, revealing only a section of her chin. She said the first line in the script. "I hate people punching my face the most." Chapter 1091. The camera zoomed in. Even the master who filmed the scene was shocked by the scene, let alone the other people on the scene. The director was the first to react. He lowered his left hand, his face filled with excitement. Pass. One word. It pulled everyone back to their senses. That's great. That's really great. The director's surprise was obvious. The people at the side sighed. This is the first time I've seen someone fight so handsomely. Oh my God, I'm going to become an Asian fan. He's Chinese, now I feel that Chinese men are sexy when they're manly. I really want to sleep with him. Oh baby, don't be like that, Chinese people are more reserved, you'll scare him away. Amidst the chaotic exclamations, the cameraman made a retracting motion. Alan's hand was still on his chest, moaning. The male actor and Alan's assistant ran over, working together to help him up. Alan didn't appreciate it, pushing the male actor away, his eyes still on the youngster, his hands clenched. When he saw everyone looking at him, his face turned red and white. He had lost to a Chinese pig in front of everyone. What was wrong with him? Alan was not convinced. He still wanted to get his face back, but anyone with a discerning eye could see how much pain he was in. After pushing the person who was supporting him away, Alan's breathing became unstable. From the start, Bojio just stood there, only when the other party came closer did she speak. This is the Chinese way of filming a fight scene. You made yourself sound so good at the start, you probably don't need to rest. I think I'm still online, we can take the chance to shoot the second part. Shoot the second part. Alan's assistant was the first to shake his head. No, this method is too barbaric, I have to bring my artist for treatment first. His words were directed at the director. The director didn't want to force him, even though Alan's attitude was a problem. But just as he was about to speak, Alan spoke, his tone cold. Alan spoke in a cold tone, I demand compensation from the production crew. I can't continue acting with such a violent actor. Violent? The director's assistant stood at the side with his eyes wide open. Was there something wrong with this person? He was the one who had chosen to act and fight with them. Now that he had lost, he said that they were violent. The director was also angry. He narrowed his eyes. From today onwards, you don't have to come anymore. Alan did not expect such an outcome. This movie was a big production. He had given up so many offers just for this movie. What right did the director have to make such a decision? Being kicked out of the cast in public was not something that could happen to him. Thinking of this, Alan swung his arm and strode towards the nanny van parked by the roadside. After getting in the car, he said to his assistant, "Get the media here." At this time, the assistant felt that it was inappropriate. The media is waiting for the film to be released. After all, this film has high expectations and good reviews. Even if we find the media and post it here, there will be people in the theater who will tell us the truth. Isn't there an uncontrolled comment section? Post the news there. The people over there don't know what happened, but once they say it, everyone will believe it. Alan had obviously thought of an excuse. Hence, after receiving the call from the media, Alan started to make up a story. There was indeed something that happened, but when it came to his mouth, it was completely reversed. He did not mention that he had provoked them. He only said that someone had hit him and that the other party had gained a lot of fans because of it. As a result, the director misunderstood him and asked him to leave the cast. At this point, Alan even sighed. I really don't want to think about the situation back then. First of all, I don't have any objections to the cast and the movie, but with such an actor around, I really want to quit. After the media recorded it to make sure that it was a headline, they were worried that people would find out if they posted it in the comments section, so they simply followed Alan's instructions and posted it elsewhere. The people there did not know what had happened. Many netizens believed it. They even exclaimed in surprise, "How could such a thing happen? Who is that actor?" Alan was still replying, "That's exactly what happened. I experienced it myself. It doesn't seem possible." Some netizens felt that there was a loophole. According to what you said, you didn't do anything wrong. Why did the director ask you to leave? Alan avoided the main point. I don't hate anyone, you can choose not to believe it, but I was indeed forced out. Now, I can only do the interview here and can't do anything else. For this movie, I spent so much effort on publicity. Now that I think about it, it's really... Alan didn't have many fans. But his words were enough to make people speculate. The discussion became more and more heated. Until someone stirred up the news to the cast and dug out the actor who had hit him. They wanted Bojo to come out and give an explanation. He shouldn't have beaten someone and forced him out. This way, the people who had doubted Bojo's suitability for this role appeared again. I really feel that the movie will be ruined. What should I do? I didn't expect this Chinese actor to be so... Sigh, I'm not looking forward to it anymore. I won't comment on the difference in ideals. But if an actor acts like this, can he still act? The negative news came crashing down. It even became more and more intense. This news spread to China. After being translated, it became Chinese. Escapades fans, no, it wasn't just Escapades fans. Everyone who liked esports didn't think that Escapades was such a person. Compared to the rational fans, there were some younger ones who were confused. Does that mean that our big Spade went to act in a movie? He really went to act in a movie. He even went overseas. At this moment, the haters came out, pretending to be passers-by. I'm not a fan, I'm not a hater. Although I have long wanted to expose Spades's character, that's right, Spades is like this, he likes to oppress others. But isn't Spades fans too bored? He didn't say who the actor was, He just looked at the description and thought that it was your spade Z. How interesting, do you think anyone can act? According to your logic, your spade Z is the best in the world. He can't even be chosen as a professional actor. Yet, your spade Z was chosen by an international director. Hee, I won't say anything. In an instant, the rumors started spreading. There was an uproar both at home and abroad. After all, Bojiu was overseas now. She wasn't just representing herself, she was representing China. According to the news online, some of Bojiu's actions were inappropriate. No one knew what exactly happened. The originally harmonious atmosphere of the cast and crew. Because of this incident, they had to stop filming. Bojiu expressed her apologies. But she said, as a Chinese, I can't tolerate others insulting my country. But because I couldn't tolerate it, I caused the delay in filming. I'm really sorry. She was apologizing to the cast and crew, not to Alan and not to some comments. Everyone present knew what was going on. Especially the male actor who had a lot of charisma, the one who called Bojiu brother. He reached out and patted Bojiu's shoulder. He was extremely humorous. If I were you, I would have beaten him up. But honestly, your performance really shocked us. Your moves were too beautiful. Is this Chinese Kung Fu? Teach me when you're free. Also, teach me how to use chopsticks. I still don't understand how you use 2 wooden sticks to eat. Won't the vegetables fall? Won't your hands clamp them? Teach me and I'll treat you to red wine. How about that? No problem. A true gentleman was straightforward when he befriended them. The rest of them agreed. The youngsters shouldn't be the one to take the blame. Regardless of whether it was according to the script or Alan's actions, there wasn't a problem with the youngsters' performance. On the other hand, Alan's insults at the start, the exposure of the cast and crew's privacy, and the intention to take revenge. As an actor, none of these actions were appropriate. Let's not talk about how much of an impact his actions had on the crew. Being a human was the most important thing. With such an actor in the cast, there wouldn't be any huge productions. However, although everyone present knew about this, they really didn't know how to explain it to the crowd at this time. After all, they weren't the parties involved and didn't understand the twists and turns in this matter. It would only make people feel that the more they explained, the worse it would be. The director's assistant looked at Bojiu with a different gaze. How should he put it? This was the entertainment industry. As a public figure, she had to endure such distortions. Even if it was unfair, there was nothing she could do. What's going on? At this moment, Movie Queen walked over from the east. She was wearing a pair of crystal shoes, a dark red blazer draped over her shoulders, her long legs exuding an aura. If Movie Queen had been elegant in the past, right now, she was covered in flames. Where did the rumors come from? This was directed at the director. After all, only the two of them knew why Bojiu had agreed to act in this scene. It was all because of Movie Queen, and Movie Queen hadn't expected such a thing to happen the moment she brought her into the cast. She knew Jo well. Usually, when she made a move, it would be against her principles. It's my fault. The director was someone who dared to admit his mistakes. Because of this, he was able to guarantee the box office. I'll get the crew to make a statement to explain the entire situation. How? The assistant felt that it wasn't appropriate. Right at this moment. From afar, a Chinese man walked over with large strides. No one knew where he came from. He was wearing a black t-shirt, his shoes were the highlight, and there seemed to be something hanging on his waist. He walked straight towards Bojiu. The rest of the people were stunned. Who was this person? A paparazzi. Where had he been hiding? None of them had noticed him. Was he here to interview someone? The director wanted to block the youngster instinctively. Bojo took a step forward in surprise, her gaze landing on his waist. It was a military knife, a model used for survival in the wilderness. Even though it was only a small part, it was enough for Bojo, who was familiar with such things, to lock onto it in an instant. Moreover, the person walked with a straight back and his movements were like a wild leopard. He had been in the cast for such a long time without being discovered. His anti-detection skills were extraordinary. Other than a soldier, no one else could do this. "Are you Brother Mo's man?" Bojo asked before the man could speak. He paused before nodding his head and passing the phone to Bojo. "This is the video I took just now. Young master asked me to pass it to you. Everything he said about you is recorded clearly in the video, from the moment you entered the set to the moment you started fighting. Also, if it wasn't for a mission, I would have wanted to beat him up as well. Thank you for your help." With that, he retreated without waiting for a response. The director understood Mandarin. When he heard this, he made a decision: post the video online and tell everyone that Alan was kicked out of the cast because of his character. He was clearly in the wrong, yet he still tried to distort the truth. "I don't want an actor like him." "All right." The assistant took the phone and tapped on the cast's account. All the media outlets were allowed to speak and they could be sent to any location. There wasn't a single piece of news, just a simple description of the entire incident. While everyone was focused on the phone, Bojo was thinking about something else. Yes, even though she hoped that this matter could be explained clearly, she wasn't representing herself. But compared to this, her attention was focused on something else. For instance, the Almighty had placed such a person beside her. What exactly was he trying to do? At this moment, Alan had already tasted the sweetness of the internet and started to fabricate even more recklessly. There was an actor who hadn't left. He was still in the cast but he didn't participate in the subsequent filming, so he didn't know about the video. Taking advantage of this wave, he reposted a comment on his country's official Weibo and posted, "Sigh, I'm in the cast too. I used to like a certain someone, but now that I've seen him in person, my impression of him is decreasing. After all, we're overseas." This sentence seemed to prove that Spade Z was indeed the one who had tarnished the country's reputation. Many people couldn't hold it in anymore. Some media outlets started to join in. Just as a large amount of negative news started to flow out. Spade Z's official Weibo had already been destroyed. At this moment, they had to hand it to Sister Turtle for contacting manager Foam in time. All the fans would have to wait for the official inquiry before replying. At this moment, many people felt the need to bite their lips. Otherwise, whatever they said or replied would become a topic of discussion. Moreover, before the accurate facts were released, they wouldn't defend their idol the moment they opened their mouths. Big Spade had once said that there were no idols in front of the country. It wasn't difficult to be such a fan. The difficult ones were the fans who already knew the ins and outs of the matter from Feng Yi. How could they continue waiting? They gritted their teeth and refused to say anything that was the truth. Finally, they didn't have to wait anymore. Chapter 1092. There weren't many words, but it clearly explained the reason for Alan's expulsion. Those who wanted to know the details could click on the video below. Everyone couldn't help but click on the video. The moment it was opened, a youngster walked into the set with a black bag slung over his shoulder and a hand stuffed into his pocket. The youngster had exquisite features and was as fair as jade. Her silver hair was messy and fluttered in the wind. It was hard to tell if she was a man or a woman. The youngster wore a black earring on her ear, giving off a faint glow. Ostentatious, arrogant, handsome. This was the first time the overseas fans saw her. The first reply was, "He's just a pretty face," and the director chased Alan away because of him. When the video caught Alan cursing, he mouthed, "Chinese pig." At this moment, most of the people fell silent. They looked at the youngster's clear and determined gaze and could already predict what would happen next. But they didn't expect that this was just the beginning. Alan continued to provoke them. There was also a Chinese actor who started to pick on the youngster's aura. But unexpectedly, the climax of the video started at this moment. The youngster came out with her makeup, her black trench coat fluttering in the wind. In that instant, there was only one word that appeared in everyone's mind: vampire aristocrat. All the fans of the drama began to click on the exclamation mark. F***ck, this is the male idol of my heart. His entire aura changed. How did he do it? I'm going to cry. I apologize for my previous words. I shouldn't have judged if he was suitable for this role before seeing him. It's not just his looks, even his aura is similar. It's reasonable for the director to choose him. I used to think that no one in this world could act like my male idol. Now, I'm starting to look forward to it. I can't wait to see the final film. The filming crew didn't disappoint because the video continued. Alan's intention to take revenge was too obvious, so obvious that some people who were anti-Chinese like him knew what was going on. Just as everyone was worried that the youngster wouldn't be able to withstand Alan's punch. The most exciting scene in the crew happened. The young man's cool movements, and the moment his windbreaker fell, the man stood tall and straight beside Alan. From the bridge of his nose to his chin to his thin lips, a casual sentence became the fixed point. I hate people punching my face the most. And then, the youngster said, this is a Chinese fight scene. It was clearly telling Alan that those who insulted our country would be beaten. At the end of the video, there was a clear record of why Alan was kicked out of the cast, and there was another Chinese actor as a foil. In an instant, the number of reposts of the video had reached a breaking point. Spades fans were the first to leave a comment. I've never regretted being your fan. Next were more people who could tell right from wrong. Well done. Don't misunderstand, the person who said this was not a Chinese. They were locals. Ordinary people were the same in this aspect, especially the hot-blooded men. This young man's self-restraint is quite good. If it were me, I would directly send this person to hell. If anyone insults my country, I will stand up for them. This is a basic human principle, isn't it? Chapter 1093. Both Huaxia and American websites went to Alan's side to comment. They just wanted to ask him this question. Alan, who was originally sitting and preparing to accept the second round of media interviews, suddenly changed the question. They had discussed how the other party had used a scheme to exclude him and get him kicked out of the crew. But the first thing the person said was, Alan, I have to ask on behalf of everyone. How do you feel now? Especially your face. What did that mean? Alan thought that someone was concerned about his injury, so he said, Don't worry, everyone. My face is not seriously injured. There was a sudden silence, and then all the staff laughed, including the host who was interviewing Alan. Alan frowned at the laughter and the look in their eyes. At that moment, his agent walked over with his phone. Ellen asked again, What are you all laughing at? You'll have to take a look for yourself. The exterior host handed over the phone in his hand. Alan's eyes widened when he saw the comments. In the end, he couldn't even breathe steadily and his face turned red and white. He finally understood what they were laughing at. But this understanding would only make him more embarrassed. Realizing that the camera was still on him, Alan stretched out his hand to cover his face. His fleeing figure was like a mouse living in the dark. Not only that, but through the video, the Huaxia audience also realized something. That was the other Huaxia actor in the video. Everything he had done and said had been seen by the crowd. From today onwards, I won't watch someone's show anymore. I'm in the same row. Not only because his flattering expression has embarrassed the Huaxia people, but also because he is distorting the truth. Everyone should have seen the message he sent. I just feel disgusted now. They are both Huaxia people, but I see the difference. Doesn't he feel guilty sending such a message? He said that because we are in Huaxia and don't know what is happening abroad. People are really not what they used to be. When others are fighting for their country's face, another person is here slandering them. The truth swept over like a storm. At first, the male actor was still happy because of the benefits and popularity. When he saw that something was wrong, his first reaction was to delete the message he sent. However, this person had obviously underestimated the power of the crowd. Delete my blog. I've already taken a screenshot and made it into a moving picture to share with everyone. He took out his phone and called his manager. You have to get me out of this, I'm not the one in the wrong. Even if someone was bullied, it would be Alan. Are these people crazy? Why can't they let me go? Think of a way. Escapades must have some dirt on him, help me dig it out and divert everyone's attention. Under normal circumstances, this was how the company operated. Even if the agent was put in a difficult position, she had to agree. After all, she had to save this kind of thing. Otherwise, why would the company hire her? The manager thought for about 3 minutes and prepared to leave. But before she could do anything, another headline appeared on China's website. The international movie queen personally released a statement to support Escapades. Even though he is overseas, he won't embarrass anyone. I am proud of his actions. When it comes to the country's honor, there is no tolerance. Some people are trying to distort the truth because their hearts are dirty and can't be saved. Movie queen and rarely spoke online. She was the goddess of countless fans, be it in China or overseas, from her looks to her acting skills and personality. She had always been elegant and firm. Many people still remembered that when she had first arrived in America, someone had asked her to be a bystander. This was what she had said. Before I came here, I was given the role of the second female lead. I'm sorry, I love acting and I want to bring Chinese culture here. But at the same time, please respect me. If you want me to be a bystander just to get the Chinese box office, I refuse to act. I have to be responsible to the audience. Admittedly, she hadn't gotten the role. But after that, as long as she acted in a role, it would always be amazing. Movie queen and didn't just gain the love of her countrymen, she also gained the respect of the American industry. They didn't try to cover everything with bias and invited her with sincerity until today. Movie queen Anne's bravery hadn't been extinguished. When the manager saw the news, she felt that there was no turning back. She was thinking of how to change the topic. However, the news that followed completely shattered her thoughts. It was from an official media outlet. There was a picture of the international superstar, Henry, smiling brightly as he hugged the shoulders of a silver-haired youngster. Below it were his own words in English. I got to know a new brother. He is extremely handsome. In terms of patriotism, we are the same. From him, I seem to have finally experienced the greatness of a great country. Young masters are like jade. So, we have decided to become sworn brothers today. All the words above were taught to me in Chinese by Joe. He will also teach me Chinese Kung Fu. Cool. The media outlet commented, protecting the country and bringing glory to the country. This is how an idol should be. In that instant, the manager could almost imagine the outcome of her artist. What kind of person was he defaming? Putting aside the fact that he had the protection of the movie queen, he had become brothers with Henry after just one day. Moreover, what he had done was to protect the country and bring glory to the country. She couldn't be protected. Even the gods wouldn't be able to protect her artist. Alan was in the same situation. Because at this moment, it wasn't the Chinese audience who didn't accept him. It was the local audience who didn't accept him. They felt that he was despicable. The actors in the production team spoke up one after another. Those who were still mocking, Spadesy isn't a professional actor. Why would he be invited to act? Their faces were swollen from being slapped. The Chinese netizens were just about to end their comments. Just then, someone intercepted the comments left by some American netizens. The comments said, "I can't describe my feelings right now. My idol seems to have come back to life. I just want to know when the main movie will be released. I can't wait to see the final movie. It's good that there's a trailer if there isn't a final movie. This youngster is too cool. He brought the character in the novel to life." Fans of the original novel asked if anyone has detailed information about this Asian youngster. "I want to know more about him. What other dramas did he act in before? I can search for them. My friend in China said that he isn't an actor." "Not an actor? Then ask your friend in China if they have any information about him. I want to know." When the Chinese netizens saw these comments, they wanted to tell them, "Don't ask your friend. Come to our Chinese website. We are going to do science, American friends." Spadesy's fans were dumbfounded. After all, they immediately accepted the fact that the youngster they liked, who held the mouse and beat up all the wild beasts, had suddenly become an actor that was loved by foreigners. They felt a little panicked and proud. When they saw the news on Weibo, they wanted to roll around on the bed. Only fans could understand this feeling. Yet, there were still some sarcastic comments. "Isn't he playing games? Why did he turn into an actor? No wonder there was a farewell party. So, someone is short of money and wants to become an actor to earn money. If he's really a rich young master, why would he come to play games?" In response to such comments, Supreme Alliance's official reply came. "Spadesy is acting out of friendship. This is the only movie. He will not be involved in the entertainment industry in the future." Acting out of friendship? With whom? This was very mysterious. But there were still astute fans. "I want to say something. There's something I've been keeping in my heart for a long time, but I don't dare to say it. Now, I have to say it. If you don't say it, we'll make you shut up." Am I the only one who thinks our almighty Qin looks like movie queenin? Comrades, don't flatter me. My heart will tremble if you continue like this. Don't they look alike? Please give me a word, I hope it's not just a symbol. F***ck, girl, my phone jammed. I just wanted to say that you're right, I think they look alike too. They don't just look alike. Look closely, the nose, the mouth, and especially the eyes. Movie queen and has an overseas bloodline. So does almighty Qin. What secret did we discover? Wait a minute, do any of you know movie queen An's age? Movie queen An's face isn't easy to guess. Let's use logical elimination. Almighty Qin's sister. Impossible, almighty Qin is his only son. His cousin. They look alike, but the Qin family's cousin doesn't have the surname In. I remember an interview. Almighty Qin said his mother's surname was In. Almighty Qin's mother is movie queen In. So this time, Big Spade's acting out of friendship is because of almighty Qin. Facepalm, why do I feel like I've been fed another round of dog food? I'm convinced by Big Spade and almighty Qin's parents. I've decided to turn off my computer for this PDA show. 5 words are floating in the sky. Daughter-in-law meets mother-in-law. The CP fans felt that this candy was a little sweet. After all, from movie Queen Anne's words, they could hear her admiration for Big Spade. It was sweet everywhere. Chapter 1094. The chauffeur and butler was bending over to serve tea. The atmosphere was completely different from the Chin family's house. Even the dining table was a European style. The butler's attire and the tea he served exuded an aristocratic aura. Earl black tea paired with slightly sweet pastries was a delightful combination. Besides, he remembered that his young master didn't hate eating. But today, the butler sized up his young master's side profile, an indescribable coldness in him. What was going on? Chin Mo held onto his phone, his uninjured hand picking up the spoon, eating elegantly. The butler was about to leave. A casual voice came from behind him. "It's a little sour." "What?" The butler turned back. Chin Mo wiped his mouth with a napkin, stuffing a hand into his pocket as he stood up. "The pastries are a little sour." With that, Chin Mo walked up the stairs. As an outstanding butler, how could the pastries he made be sour? The handsome butler studied the pastries on the wooden table, dipping his finger into it. It was obviously sweet and sour. What was wrong with his young master today? Was his taste buds out of whack? The butler didn't have a habit of looking at Weibo, so he didn't know what was wrong with Chin Mo. At this moment, movie Queenan and Bojo were finally facing each other on the set. Anyone who had worked in a movie would know that filming didn't follow the sequence of the script. Instead, they would film the scene that was suitable for them. The weather was perfect. With the lingering light of dusk, they could clearly capture the sunlight splashing onto their hair. Bojo sat in front of a computer, still wearing the black trench coat. She wasn't wearing her hat, her long fingers tapping on the keyboard. The actors watching from the side were still thinking that this scene would require post-production since no one would be able to type so many words and codes in such a short period of time. But the moment the camera started rolling, everyone was shocked. The youngster's fingers moved swiftly, moving up and down so fast that it seemed like an afterimage. A dialogue box popped up on the screen, as though there was some code running through it. Amazing! That was amazing! The director's happiness was obvious. It was also from this moment on that the crew members understood something. The director hadn't chosen the youngster for this role just because of his face. If they hadn't known it was an act, they would have assumed that the youngster was attacking the internet. That's awesome. Joe, you're amazing. Henry was the first to run towards her. As an American, he was passionate and wanted to give the youngster a hug. Bojo turned, a faint smile on her face. "Harry, do you still want to learn Chinese Kung Fu?" "Of course." Henry crossed his arms in front of his chest. He was indeed very handsome when he smiled. Bojo glanced up, her gaze landing on a spot. She turned and said, "Do you see the person sitting on the other side of the wall? He's dressed in black. Before learning martial arts, you have to train your observation skills and reflexes. I'll go in to change my clothes later. You'll be in charge of diverting his attention." "That's it." Henry didn't think it was real. Bojo thought for a moment and pretended to take out a book from her bag. There were only 3 words written on it: Secret of Kung Fu. "This is our family heirloom. I don't usually tell others, but I'm passing it to you now." Bojo shrugged. "You should believe me now, right?" Harry gave him a thumbs up. "Good brother, I'm going to train now. I'll start training after I'm done." "Go ahead." Bojo smiled. She waited for Henry to block someone's line of sight before she took the opportunity to move. She kicked the car with her long legs and climbed up the tree and over the wall. Her movements were agile. Henry still didn't know his main purpose. He saw his target staring at him like a wolf. As an actor, he successfully maintained the stalemate for 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, the other party finally changed to another spot. This way, he should be able to pass. Henry thought about it and hid the secret of Kung Fu in his hands. Excuse me. They were all physics questions. Chapter 1095. The expression on Henry's face changed several times. F***ck. What happened to the basic trust between humans? At this moment, the person who had been watching Bojo appeared. From his angle, he had thought that Bojo had entered the changing room. In reality, the youngster had already passed through the alleys as though she was doing parkour. Bojo moved quickly. She was like a living map with a cheat code. After all, this was her territory. She could take shortcuts even if she closed her eyes. In the end, she stopped at the most famous street in America. Fifth Avenue. There were jewelry, leather, clothing, and cosmetics shops here. Every year, it attracted thousands of tourists. At this moment, Bojo slowed down her footsteps and walked towards an old phone booth. It was located at the entrance of the alley. When Bojo walked in, there were a few black men who were scribbling. They paused and glanced at Bojo, their gaze unreadable. Bojo's attire prevented them from moving, but they exchanged glances. Bojo didn't say a word. She held onto an electronic cigarette lighter with one hand and pressed it. There was a click. She tilted her head and lit a cigarette. In perfect English, she said, "Bro, give way." When the few black men saw the silver words flash past, they were stunned. They took 2 steps back. They didn't leave. They just couldn't believe it. Did they recognize the wrong person? How could they see that thing? But, they looked up at the youngster. The back view was indeed similar. What should we do? Continue to scribble. Don't care. Didn't you see the thing in that person's hand? How are we going to care? Just do what you have to do. Bojo entered the phone booth as though there was no one else around. She placed her finger on it and placed a coin in it. Then she pressed a string of numbers that seemed to be a password. There was a loud rumble. The wall where the phone was connected to slowly opened to one side, revealing a passageway. Bojo stuffed a hand into her pocket. She turned back and smiled devilishly at the black men who were still sneaking glances at her. "You're right, I'm back. F***ck." At this moment, the shock in their hearts could be heard all over the world. At first, those few black men still doubted whether the other party was the one who had beaten them until their teeth fell all over the floor. But now, they were sure it was her. But even if he knew, there was nothing he could do. He would suffer internal injuries. After all, there was no way he could beat them. We're all neighbors, just like before. Please take care of me. Bojo flipped over and waved. The few black men outside just wanted to roar. What do you mean by, take good care of me? Bojo didn't turn back as she walked up the stairs. It was a vast expanse of darkness. There seemed to be no end to it. It seemed like no one had been here before. Bojo arched a brow and pressed her fingers against the wall. Swoosh. The lights of the entire place lit up. It was even a little dazzling. Bojo stretched out her arm to block it. It was also at that moment. The whole picture of this place was completely revealed. The 2-story building was very large. It looked like a residence, but at the same time, it wasn't. Although there was a bed on the 2nd floor, it didn't look like it was used for sleeping. Instead, it looked like a temporary resting place. More than 900 square meters. There seemed to be something parked on the 1st floor, but unfortunately, it was all covered by white cloth. Bojo walked over casually. Then she lifted her thin lips and raised her right hand. Swoosh. When the white cloth was lifted, the beautiful and smooth curves of the car with an untamed black luster were revealed. Lamborghini, Bat. The limited edition sports car that could increase its speed in an instant. It got its name because of its cool wings. This wasn't a place for people to stay. It was Bojio's private garage. Other than Bat, there were 2 other sports cars and a BMW Tomahawk. Bojio stood in the middle, not feeling out of place. It was as though this was where she should be. Little Blackie, I'm back. It's time for you to wake up. Bojio's voice was lazy. But there was no one here. Who was she talking to? However, her voice was effective. There was a ding. Something seemed to be activated. Identifying the source of the sound. 20%, 40%. 100%. The sound source is confirmed. It matches 90%. Sorry, it can't be activated 90%. At this moment, Bojio finally remembered that she had changed her body. Switch to manual password activation. Bojio sighed helplessly. She pressed her fingers on the car. Starting to verify the password. Take note, if the password is wrong, you will have to bear the consequences. Bojio arched a brow. I should have made you more humorous. This reminder is too stiff. With that, Bojio moved her fingers. After she entered the password, the car lights lit up. Master, I really didn't expect you to come back alive. Why didn't your voice match? It turned out that this was a modified car. It was fully equipped with intelligent parts and the navigation system was different from normal cars. I'm still hesitating. Should I let you drive me? Bojio was already in the driver's seat. Her fingers were on the steering wheel. She tilted her head and laughed devilishly. Do you want me to activate your self-destruct password for you to verify? The navigation line wavered. It was extremely serious. Oh. Master, I missed you so much when you were away. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to eat or sleep well outside. I was afraid that you would be seduced by some flirtatious little tch. As a car, I was really worried. You're good at steering with the wind. Bojio patted the steering wheel. The navigation line wavered again. That's one of my many strengths. Alright, reset the sound wave. Bojio entered a string of password on the navigation system. We'll begin the sound wave identification. Reset. Password changed. Even the password has to be changed. Of course. Alright, what's the voice password? Can you not stand up and masturbate? Sure, I'm very cultured now. I'm looking forward to Master's upbringing. I like you, Chin Mo, what? The voice password is set to, I like you, Chin Mo, don't bully an intelligent system for being uncultured. It knew the feeling of liking someone through a search. Oh, Master, you really. Not saying anything, not saying anything. When the password was reset and the car started, all the lights in the garage lit up, including all the hidden doors. The scene was so cool that it seemed like it could only be seen in a movie. Bojio turned her fingers. With a beautiful drift, she drove out of the garage. Who would have imagined that such a beautiful sports car would suddenly appear in an alley? The few black men bumped their heads. Once again, they confirmed that it was indeed that fellow. Same family. Bojio only had to say 2 words before the intelligent system recognized her voice and navigated the entire route. She drove along the nearest road. First, she passed through the tall buildings on both sides of the road. Then, she flew towards the long bridge. That kind of speed and model would attract many people's attention when they passed by. It wasn't until the car drove further and further into the east that the surroundings gradually became covered with trees. She followed the road and pushed aside the rising light. Only the castle in the forest was left. The castle wasn't big, but it seemed to be from a long time ago. It was rumored that this was once owned by an aristocrat. Later on, the aristocrat declined and mortgaged the castle in the 19th century. Many people said that this was a mysterious place. The people who lived there must be the blood-sucking clan. If not, there wouldn't be so many roses outside. However, it was a place that everyone yearned for. During the day, when the sun shone and the roses bloomed, there would always be an old butler. In the afternoon, he would walk out with a pocket watch. He would check the time and then place a pot of Earl black tea and exquisite pastries in the courtyard. However, what made people afraid to approach him was that beside those things, there was a jar. In the jar, there were either severed hands or legs. That wasn't all. The old butler actually used the scalpel in his hand to cut the pastries and put them into his mouth. That scene had already scared a lot of people who wanted to come here to visit. Even when the old butler saw a child and wanted to give him a piece of candy, he was scared to tears. He thought that nothing would change here. It was the same point again. The door of the castle opened. The old butler had white hair. He was dressed in a well-ironed suit and wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He looked at the pocket watch in his hand and then scattered something to the white pigeon in the courtyard. Then, he turned and pushed the metal dining cart out. He placed the things in the middle of the courtyard. The weather is not bad. The old butler muttered to himself as if he was used to talking alone. He squinted at the sunlight jumping on the flowers and trees. He took a sip of tea leisurely and was about to cut the pastries. White pigeons flew everywhere and the sound of a car came from afar. The old butler frowned and muttered, "It's here again." When he stood up and was about to decline the guest, he saw the silhouette of the car and was shocked to the ground. One could clearly see that the sunlight was shaking violently in his eyes. The old butler had never lost his composure like this before. After all, the first word that came to everyone's mind when they saw him was seriousness. But at this moment, he even walked faster than usual. He didn't care if the teacup on the table fell to the ground. He just walked quickly out of the courtyard and waited for the car door to open. The car door did indeed open. A young man walked out from within. Silver hair. The old butler loosened his grip on the pocket watch. His eyes were full of disappointment. It wasn't the young master, he was thinking too much. But the next second, the teenager's voice came. "Grandpa Butler, I wonder if there are sweets to eat at this hour." The old butler was shocked. He looked at the teenager again. This appearance. That was impossible. He had been waiting for the young master to come back. But in his heart, he also knew that the young master was definitely in danger. Otherwise, there wouldn't be no news for so long. Chapter 1096. This isn't my body. Grandfather Butler, you're a big shot in the medical world and you only believe in science. But I can't explain this. My thoughts and memories, along with my mole, have been reborn into this body. The old butler was much calmer now. Take a seat. Bojo knew that Grandfather Butler wouldn't believe her immediately. She turned to look for help. "Little Blackie, help me say something." "Yes." The car lights lit up and the navigation ripples appeared. "I don't know which little vixen has seduced Master's soul. Even the password has been changed to, I like your sultry voice. Grandpa Butler, you have to control her." Bojo. F***CK, who allowed you to say that? The old butler had always been clear-headed. He believed Bojo now. But from his perspective, he had to be more cautious. Especially after his young lord left. He had heard rumors that someone had impersonated his young lord before. Hence, stay for dinner. Bojio rubbed her forehead, troubled. This won't do, Grandfather Butler, I have something to do and have to head back. I know you don't believe me, but how about this? Since things have come to this, I can only expose your shortcomings and tell you that I'm the real one. For example, when we were young, you would bring me around to give sweets to the children. You said that bringing me along would make you more approachable. Otherwise, the children would cry the moment they saw you, which made you feel defeated. That's right, it's indeed a failure as a doctor. The old butler's veins popped. He started to clench his fists. If he had a walking stick in his hand, he would definitely hit her. Unexpectedly, the youngster was still as lovable and hateful as before. But immediately, there was a twist. Even so, in my heart, Grandfather Butler has always been the most caring doctor. Bat. Everyone should know who he inherited his ability to act according to the situation. The old butler suppressed his laughter. Flattery won't work. I really can't have dinner. Bojio smiled mischievously. Grandfather Butler, you already know that I'm real. You just want me to have dinner with you. Don't worry, I'll bring someone over for dinner tomorrow night. The old butler was certain that she was his young lord, reborn into another person's body. Stop, Grandpa Butler, I'm not going to let you do physical research. Bojio raised her hands high, behaving like a rich young master. But I need Grandfather Butler to treat someone. The old butler humphed. Young master, shouldn't you first tell me why you haven't returned home for so long? Would you believe me if I told you I did it to woo a man? Bojio smiled. The old butler rubbed his forehead. How many times have I told you, young master, as a lady, you have to be more elegant. I will elegantly state that I want to kidnap him tomorrow. Bojio smiled. I need Grandfather Butler's help. The old butler was very smart. There are very few people that young master can't handle alone. Who is he? Bojio caressed her nose. Captain of the Special Forces, criminal psychologist, the only heir of the Qin family, grandson of the Yin family. These were layers upon layers of relationships. It made the old butler feel more and more headache. Is it the Yin family that I know? It's that Yin family. Bojio sat on the chair. They are rich, that's why I'm so passive. Chapter 1097. Bojio caressed her nose. The captain of the Special Forces, a criminal psychologist, the only heir of the Qin family and the grandson of the Yin family. There were so many layers of relationships. The old butler felt his head hurting. The Yin family that I know of. The Yin family. Bojio sat on the chair. They are rich, that's why I'm in such a passive position. The old butler glanced at his young lord's desolate expression, assuming that she was putting on a show. He placed his hands behind his back and spat out, "Tie her up." At the same time, at the Yin family mansion, a blond man with a hooked nose and a blade strolled in. He was in his late 30s, but Americans looked more mature than Chinese people of the same age. He was dressed casually, but his steps were graceful. Even though he didn't bother with the small details, he was well-mannered. He entered the hall and removed his hat. Is Qin in? The butler was momentarily stunned when he saw the person, but he regained his elegance. Young master is in the study. He was in a rush. If Qin was back, he would definitely be able to solve the case on his hands. The wooden door to the study opened. Qin Mo glanced up, expecting to see the youngster who should be back by now. He hadn't expected to see an old friend. You left in such a hurry, I don't think it was just to send me a document. Qin Mo sat with his legs crossed, placing his pen on the table. It wasn't anyone else, it was the famous investigator from the FBI, Stephen. He sat on the chair. Chin, I encountered a difficult case and need your help. Chin Mo stood up, grabbing a newspaper from the coffee table. He flipped it open and glanced through it. Steven couldn't sit still. Chin, I'm serious, this case is really strange, the criminal knows hypnosis. Chin Mo interrupted him calmly. He was still as handsome as ever. The crime scene has been destroyed. Your investigation isn't going in the right direction. Steven's eyes widened. You saw the crime scene. How is that possible? Chin Mo reached out and pressed the back of the newspaper, tapping it with his fingertips. Here, the serial suicide case, someone is suspecting the culprit, the photos were taken by the accompanying media. That's it. Steven's body was no longer as tense as before. I thought you had some special ability to see the cases here from China. Chin Mo was still looking at the photos in the newspaper. His voice was neither fast nor slow. Do you know why hypnotists are successful? It's because they don't just divert people's attention, they can also understand the psychology of ordinary people to a certain extent. They don't necessarily have to be at the scene to get the information. Steven shrugged. Well, he was now classified as a normal person. There must be a connection between the victims. Chin Mo retracted his gaze. Find the connection. Hearing that, Steven stood up and wanted to leave. He was very emotional. Chin Mo frowned. Information. Steven was helpless. I've already given you all the information on Z. Moreover, didn't she go to China? Why are you here in America? At this point, Steven seemed to realize something. He suddenly raised his head and stuttered, Don't tell me that guy is back. Chin Mo glanced at him and spat out 2 words. No. Steven muttered, That's good. Otherwise, I'll have to make another report. What was my subordinate, Smith, thinking? He insisted on going to China to capture Z. Now that he's back, I don't know what kind of blow he suffered, but he's depressed all day. Compared to when he made the report, his aura seems even lower, Smith. Chin Mo arched a brow. Steven nodded. Smith, what's wrong? Nothing. Chin Mo smiled teasingly. You should leave, officer. Steven. Didn't they say that Chinese people were warm and hospitable, especially foreigners? He must have gotten to know a fake Chinese person. But this trip wasn't in vain. The moment Steven left the villa, he turned on the police light in his car. Chin Mo asked him to leave because too much time had passed. A certain someone should be back soon. Chin Mo unlocked his phone and dialed a number. Turned off his phone. Before leaving the country, the two of them had activated international roaming so that it would be easier to contact each other. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed when he heard the notification. He didn't call Movie Queen in. Instead, he pressed a string of numbers, his voice low. Go take a look at young Master Joe. Young Master Joe is still in the makeup removal room, it isn't convenient for me to go in. The person who spoke was at the filming location. It was the person who had video called Bojo. Chin Mo's frown deepened. Makeup room. How long has she been in there? Half an hour, the same for the other actors. Other than removing their makeup, they have to change their clothes. It's normal. Normal to others. But not to a certain someone. Chin Mo lowered his voice. Ask the staff to confirm if she is really removing her makeup. Yes. The moment the person heard his young master's order, he realized something was amiss. By the time he asked the staff, his throat was a little dry. Chin Mo didn't hang up. What's the situation? Young Master Joe didn't enter the makeup removal room, The person wanted to say that he had seen her enter with his own eyes, but in the next second, he remembered something. It's that person just now. That person had blocked his view. That was when young Master Joe had disappeared. Nemo tightened his grip on the phone, his back turning stiff. He had already made preparations, but wasn't it enough? Send someone to look for her. The coldness in Mo's eyes was like a thick fog, entangling within. Focus on investigating Fifth Avenue. Yes. In reality, Nemo didn't know how he had hung up. That person had really left. She hadn't said anything, didn't leave any address, didn't even say goodbye. Nemo sat there, his heart feeling like it had been hollowed out. Before he had come here, he had heard her calling him Brother Mo. She seemed to be planning something when she was eating, her head furry like a little fox. Even though she was efficient, she was like a child at certain times. Hence, he wanted to take care of her no matter what. It was as though just hugging her and smelling her hair would make him feel better. She had been so close, but she had suddenly disappeared. The phone screen lit up. It was a photo of the two of them. Mo's heart suddenly hurt so much that he had to bend over to stand up. It wasn't possible for him to continue sitting in the study. Nemo went to the filming location personally. Movie Queenan was still filming. But Nemo didn't look for Movie Queenan, he looked for the director. Are you saying that all the scenes have been filmed? It's only been a day. Nemo frowned. The director sat there, taking a break. I find this progress unbelievable too. Young Master Joe has a good grasp of the character's personality. All the scenes were shot in one go and it was even more outstanding than I had imagined. It was as though he had always been that person, it was amazing. The director was excited when he talked about this, even showing the youngster's last scene. That scene was originally reserved for the opening scene. At that time, the youngster wasn't wearing a black trench coat. Instead, he was wearing a pure white shirt. He was sitting on a branch with lush foliage, with a book covering his face. After hearing the sound, he seemed to have just woken up from a dream. He took the book away with one hand, and his eyes were as bright as stars as he looked at the camera with a smile. His silver hair was a little messy, and two of the buttons on his shirt were undone. He looked extremely casual. Leaves fell, landing on the youngster's shoulders. When he blew on them, the scene was filled with the smell of sunshine. It was this youngster who appeared at the end. He was dressed in black and looked extremely handsome. Nemo looked at the camera, his eyes undulating with intense emotions, but he restrained himself. He placed his fingers on his knees, clenched and released them. Thank you, director. I have something to do, goodbye. Nemo stood up, walking towards the car. At this moment, he was certain. Someone had planned this from the start. Although it was just like what the director had said, many people couldn't finish filming in one day. But looking at the entire movie, a certain someone didn't appear in many scenes. A certain someone did not appear in many scenes. Most of the time, it was just her back. Only 3 scenes had captured her face. Therefore, it was not impossible to finish shooting all the scenes in one day. As long as that person had a heart. Nemo sat in the car, one hand gripping the steering wheel tightly. He knew she was planning to leave. However, he didn't expect that she didn't miss it at all. Nemo started the car at a frightening speed. What he didn't know was that when he started the car, a voice suddenly rang out. Behind his car, another car quickly caught up with him. The car came out from the side. It had smooth lines and was completely black. It also exuded a domineering aura. Master, as a qualified sports car, I have to give you a suggestion. Judging from the speed of the other party's car, his emotions are very unstable. Should we bring some weapons? Swoosh. Beautiful tail wagging. Bojo stopped the car, feeling slightly guilty. You don't have to take the weapon. The navigation bar moved. I didn't expect Master to have a guilty conscience. As long as I have the medicine grandfather butler gave me. Bojo glanced sideways, her gaze landing on the passenger seat. The navigation bar. What kind of guilty conscience was that? As expected, it couldn't understand human emotions. I have to think of a way to make the Almighty stop. Bojo's eyes moved. She remembered the phone in her pocket. She pressed the button to light it up. When she saw the 20 unread messages, she felt even more guilty. Even through the screen, she could feel the Almighty's desire to kill her. But since things had come to this, it would be a waste of time to be sentimental. She had to tie him up. Chapter 1098. Swoosh. It was another beautiful swing of the tail. Without any restraints, Bojo's racing skills were like those of an American blockbuster. The sunroof opened, her silver hair swaying in the wind. The youngster's thin lips and the lollipop in her mouth formed an indescribable mischievousness. The navigation beeped. 60 meters to the target. Master, do you still remember? I have a bad feeling about this. Oh, what exactly is this little vixen that you can't forget? It's affecting your judgment. As a car, you're too noisy. Bojo glanced at the back of the car, her gaze intense. All right, I'll be quiet. But before that, I have to remind you that our tracks have been discovered. The navigation beeped again. It's tiring for a girl to chase after a guy. Bojo arched a brow. He found out so quickly. As expected, it wasn't easy to kidnap the Almighty. Chi Nemo had indeed noticed something. If it wasn't for his mood. With his analytical ability, he would have discovered the car behind even faster. Chi Nemo narrowed his eyes and suddenly slowed down the car, catching her off guard. The Lamborghini Bat had quick reflexes. It slowed down as well. The two eye-catching sports cars sped along the straight road as though they were competing. It was a beautiful sight. Bojo licked her lips and spat out the lollipop. It seems like I'm going to use my ultimate move. Master, before you use your ultimate move, you have to take a look at the police cars behind you. If the navigation system could display an expression, it would be a facepalm. There are already 3 of them. Bojo glanced up at the rearview mirror. Let them chase, the more the merrier. Hence. On the famous Fifth Avenue, besides the 2 sports cars, there was another row of police cars. This attracted everyone's attention. Analysis report, the car in front is slowing down, it seems like it's going to stop. The navigation beeped. Master, should we stop too? No, charge over. Bojo arched a brow. I have to find a chance to drug Brother Mo. He will be embarrassed if we drug him in front of so many people. The little bat. What kind of drug are you trying to drug him? After Chi Nemo parked the car by the roadside, he watched as a black shadow flew past him. That speed was very fast. What was even stranger was that when the car brushed past, there was actually no one in the driver's seat. Inside the car, the navigation system buzzed again. Master, you don't seem to dare to face him. Bojo exerted strength with one hand, straightening her body. What do you know? This is called strategy. Navigation. I will quietly watch your guilty conscience. Bojo didn't say anything else. She shook off the first police car and took a detour to the other side. She shook off the second police car, and by the time she reached the third one, there was no need to shake it off anymore. The distance between the cars was too wide. In the sea of cars, there were no police cars in sight. But in the next second, the voice of the navigation system became extremely shocked. F***CK, F***CK, Master, what kind of little demon are you chasing? That fellow is now more than 100 meters behind us. This is too scary. Not only did you fail to chase, you're being chased instead. Bojo glanced at the rearview mirror. The Almighty was indeed cunning. How exactly did he manage to predict her route? The 3 police cars had unknowingly become his tools to test her. The more he thought about it, the brighter Bojo's eyes became. She moved her fingers, dialing a number. Chin Mo's fingers were placed at the side, preparing to increase his speed. Until that unique ringtone sounded. His gaze froze, and he slowed down instantly. He gave up on chasing the sports car that had been following him. He turned the steering wheel, stopping by the side of the road. He picked up the call, his voice cold. "Where are you?" As expected, he was angry. Bojo was still driving, wearing a black earpiece. She said seriously, "I wanted to take a taxi to the place you told me but I got lost." "Is that so?" Chin-mo obviously didn't believe her, but he was smart enough to know that the most important thing now was to find her. "Send me your address." Bojo was slightly afraid. "This place. I can't tell you the name. Why don't I find a cafe and share my location with you? Send it now." She could tell that he was trying his best to suppress himself. Bojo turned a corner and was nearer to the filming location. She tapped on the WeChat shared location. "I'll wait for Brother Mo to pick me up. Mrs. Chin." On the other end of the line, Chin-mo spoke again, his voice as cold as ice. "You better be waiting for me to pick you up." Bojo felt even more weak. He hung up. The navigation system heard him very clearly. "How should I say this, Master? I think you've already lost your credibility with the other party. If the little fairy knows that you're going to kidnap her, she might chop you into pieces. Little Blackie, you're using your humor in the wrong place. Put me down and wait nearby." With that, she took out her smart key and walked into a cafe with desserts. The reason he chose this place was because it had the best view of the entire avenue. She also understood that in order to kidnap the Almighty, she had to use some tricks. He couldn't even do it openly. Bojo was helpless. Was it so hard to kidnap the one you loved? Bojo sat down, troubled. She ordered 2 cups of coffee and drugged one of them. When she drugged him, she also felt guilty. However, when she saw the red dot on the shared location getting closer and closer to her, she felt guilty. She would just be at the Almighty's disposal when the time came. Besides, if she didn't kidnap him, how was she going to treat his hand? Bojo admitted that she was finding an excuse for herself. But on second thought, the Almighty's suspicions towards her had been growing, and it was only a matter of time before he found out her identity. Before that, she had wanted to monopolize her pet for a few days. With that in mind, Bojo tapped the red dot on the screen. Her handsome face puffed up. "That's it. Come." Outside the window, Chin-mo alighted from the car. Indeed, he didn't observe his surroundings. After all his thoughts were on locking a certain someone in his hands. When he got closer, he arched a brow. "The best view. What was that guy up to?" "Young master, the car that followed you is near you. It's 9:00, be careful." It turned out that Chin-mo had always been followed by professionals. His communication tool was a small communication device under his black hair. He had been wearing it ever since he had arrived in America. "Go take a look." Chin-mo walked forward nonchalantly. Even the passers-by didn't notice his orders. "Yes." One of them shifted his position. Chin-mo pushed open the glass door and walked into the cafe. The first thing he saw was the youngster tapping the screen. Bojo noticed the gasps around her. She turned towards the source of the sound and saw the Almighty walking towards her. He was dressed in a business suit with a pair of handcuffs on his hands. It was extremely eye-catching. Was the Almighty trying to seduce her with his uniform? Bojo was about to stand up, but before she could speak, there was a click. Her wrist was locked. Everyone's gaze focused on her. The Almighty was probably the only one who could smile in such a situation. But that smile didn't enter his eyes. Chin-mo sat opposite the youngster as though there was no one else around. He tapped the handcuffed wrist with his fingers, exuding an air of nobility and abstinence. Bojo lowered her gaze before retracting it. Her eyes were clear. "Why did you lock me up? What do you think?" Chin-mo asked as he locked the other end of the handcuff onto his wrist. Bojo shifted. "It's not convenient to drink coffee." "Which cup?" Chin-mo was still restraining himself. He was afraid he would do something he would regret if he was too violent. But when he remembered the news, he almost wanted to dig a hole. Bojo felt guilty. "I don't have to drink." Chin-mo wasn't sure what she was thinking. Since she hadn't left, he should dissipate the coldness. He seemed to be calming his emotions. He reached out and pressed the back of her head, kissing her in that position. They were in the cafe. Bojo's eyes widened. Her mind went blank. Chin-mo retracted his hand, his lips still glistening. His voice was hoarse. "I should have installed a tracking device on you." Bojo didn't have a chance to reply. Chin-mo probably wasn't in the mood to listen to her lie. He took a piece of cake and stuffed it into her mouth. Bojo puffed up her cheeks as she chewed. The Almighty pinched her cheeks. "Just this once, do you understand?" Bojo swallowed the cake. "Sure, Brother Mo, can you help me remove the handcuffs? It's good to be locked up, it keeps you in check." Chin-mo's fingers caressed the corner of the youngster's mouth, wiping away the crumbs of the cake. His actions and expression were filled with an indescribable pampering. The people in the cafe were confused. What was going on? At the start, they had assumed the police were arresting someone. But now, they were confused. Was he under house arrest? It didn't seem like it from the youngster's expression. It was a mess, it was really a mess. Bojo rested her chin on the table, feeling slightly depressed. It's embarrassing to be locked up like this. If you don't want to be embarrassed, don't switch off your phone next time. Chin-mo picked up another piece of fruit with his fork and fed it to her. It was obvious that the kiss had stabilized his emotions. Bojo felt that this couldn't go on, the Almighty who had regained his rationality was too difficult to deal with. "Brother Mo, have some coffee." "I ordered it for you, it would be a waste if you don't drink it," Bojo said naturally. Chin-mo swept a glance at the coffee beside him. He didn't seem interested, instead, he seemed to be feeding her. Bojo ate the various things that were fed to her, her gaze sweeping over the untouched coffee. She arched a brow. She was almost done with the dessert, but the Almighty hadn't fallen for it. This wasn't going according to her plan at all. At this moment, a faint sound entered Chin-mo's ears. Chin-mo straightened, widening the distance between them. He tapped on his watch. "Young master, I found the target, there isn't anyone on it. The car's engine isn't turned off but the door isn't open, it's a little strange." Just as he was speaking, the navigation system in the car moved. At this moment, little Blackie's mind was filled with thoughts. "You foolish human, how dare you drive me without the password? Stop dreaming, wait a minute." But why wasn't Master out yet? This wasn't her usual style of doing things. Bojo wanted to head out too, but the Almighty seemed to be against her, refusing to drink the coffee. Helplessly, Chin-mo suggested going home. In order to continue with her plan, Bojo could only use eating to stall for time. I want to eat another waffle. Chin-mo glanced at her, reaching out to pinch her face. You look like a demon. Brother Mo, I'm locked in your hands, how can I be a demon? Bojo asked with a serious expression. I need to grow, eat more. Chin-mo arched a brow, his gaze shifting downwards. Oh. Indeed, you should eat more. Bojo. Almighty, what are you looking at? Chin-mo was relieved now that he had found her. Even though he wasn't sure what she wanted to do, he was happy to continue feeding her. Bojo watched as the 3 plates of waffles were placed in front of her, each plate ridiculously huge. She glanced up at the elegant face in front of her. The Almighty must have done it on purpose. Eat, you can ask for more after you finish. Once Chin-mo was nonchalant, there was a hint of blackness in his voice. Bojo thought to herself, in order to tie him up, it wasn't a big deal to eat. She had a huge appetite anyway. It's boring to eat alone, Bojo replied. She reached for the coffee cup beside Chin-mo's hand, bringing it to his lips without a second word. Chin-mo didn't reject her this time. In fact, he rarely rejected her even after knowing her identity. In his heart, she was still a sensitive child who hadn't gone through puberty. When Bojo saw Chin-mo's thin lips move slightly, she broke into a smile. Her smile was like the clear sunlight hitting the spring water. Chin-mo subconsciously took 2 more sips, and half of the coffee went down his throat. If she had to describe it, Bojo would definitely have a vile person shouting proudly. But on the surface, she didn't reveal anything since she had to wait for the medicine to take effect. The effect of the medicine was really quick. Chin-mo quickly realized something was amiss. The shadow in front of him was swaying. He lifted his lids and glanced over at the youngster. Bojo felt uncomfortable under his gaze, her voice sounding sheepish. I'm sorry, Brother Mo, I really want to tie you up. Don't worry, there aren't any side effects. Tie me up. Chin-mo shook his head again, his brows furrowed. Bojo felt that she had gone overboard. She leaned over and kissed him. MMH, to tie you up. That's why I agreed to come to America to film. It's a little despicable, don't hate me. Chin-mo froze. He was reminded of what a certain someone had been talking about in her dreams. He could guess many reasons why she wanted him to come to America. Chapter 1099. Chin-mo's brain froze for a moment, the shock in his eyes obvious. Apart from this guy in front of him, there was no one else in this world who could make young Master Chin so emotional. He had originally thought that she had been scheming all along just to escape from him. But in the end, kidnap him and bring him home. Chin-mo's head was still a little dizzy and his limbs were weak. But even so, his eyes were still very deep. No one knew what he was thinking, and his temperament did not change at all. This made Bojo feel even more guilty. She muttered, "Why is the medicine that Grandfather Butler gave me so weak?" In fact, the effect of the medicine was not bad at all. However, Chin-mo had received specialized training in this area. There was a certain degree of resistance to the medicinal effects. Bojo bowed. Brother Mo, sorry for the offense. Chin-mo shook his head and narrowed his eyes. Are you going to carry me out? I'll just hold on for a while. She didn't forget to observe his expression, afraid that he wasn't drugged. But it was obvious that Chin-mo had no strength in his limbs, and his head was getting dizzier. Bojo took the chance to help him up, adding, Brother Mo, I know you have to be mindful of your image. I won't carry you anymore, I'll carry you. Chin-mo gritted his teeth. If that's the case, I might as well carry him. The bystanders were all astonished at how a youth could have such great strength. Bojo was like a child who had received a treasure, kissing Chin Mo's face. The entire cafe was a little stunned. The man who came in handcuffs was taken away by the young man. This plot, the earphones hidden in Chin Mo's hair vibrated slightly. His voice was very soft. "Young master, what's wrong? Did something happen over there?" Chin Mo didn't answer. The people hiding in the dark glanced at each other and prepared to move. Young Master Joe carried the young master out. Several people's gazes were focused on one point. What was going on? The young master didn't give any instructions. Did that mean that they didn't need to move? Just as they were guessing, Bojo didn't notice that she had touched the public button. "Brother Mo, I know you must be angry at me for kidnapping you. This is..." Young Master Joe's voice. Those people looked at each other again. This time, his eyes were clearly shaken. Young Master Joe kidnapped young master? Even if you're angry, there's nothing you can do. If you don't come overseas, you won't have a chance to do anything in China. Hearing this sentence, the person hiding in the long alley wanted to show himself. But at this moment, he didn't know if it was a coincidence. Chin Mo glanced up. The few figures stopped moving one after another. "Young master was looking at us just now." "I think so. But I don't think so." Coincidence? Why do I feel like young master is telling us not to go out? Let's take another look. That's the only way. After all, the young master didn't give them any instructions. But the matter of the young master being kidnapped, before they could come up with a general outline, the figure who was still studying the Lamborghini on the left side of the road suddenly froze. Not because of anything else, but because the car's headlights suddenly lit up. Yes. The headlights came on. Bojo pressed the driverless button on the car key. The navigation system fluctuated up and down. "Target locked, master." Even the gaze of the frozen figure trembled for a moment. What did he just hear? A car spoke. This world was a little fantastical. When the Lamborghini moved, the most important thing was speed. It swung its tail in an extreme turn. With a sharp turn, it sped towards Bojo's direction. The next second, it braked, stopping in front of the two people. Even though Chin Mo didn't have the strength to retaliate, he was still able to think. The car in front of him was extremely familiar. It had been following him since the filming set. So it belonged to this fellow. Bojo didn't care about her guilt anymore. She replied straightforwardly, "I like you, Chin Mo." The car door opened with a loud bang. Chin Mo arched a brow, looking towards the youngster. Bojo caressed the bridge of her nose. Voice password. With that, Bojo bent over and placed the youngster in the car. Hence, everyone looked towards the side of the road. Young Master Joe placed their young master in the back seat with great effort, a serious expression on his face. Even though the timing wasn't right. They wanted to ask, was he that happy to kidnap their young master? Young Master Joe definitely didn't understand their young master well. This was practically kidnapping the devil back home. Bojo was clear about this, but she was afraid the Almighty would play some tricks. Hence, she took out the handcuffs Chin Mo had used just now and placed them on his wrists. "Brother Mo, I'll unlock them for you when we reach home." Chin Mo didn't reply, but he frowned. Bojo knew that the Almighty wasn't willing to entertain her. In the end, Chin Mo asked, "What did you use on me?" "To let you sleep, but Brother Mo, you're too dangerous, you're still awake." Bojo closed the car door and pulled open the driver's seat. The moment she held onto the steering wheel, she felt a little more at ease. However, there was a slight change in the navigation system. "Master, there's someone tailing us." Bojo glanced at the rear mirror. She turned the steering wheel with her left hand and retreated swiftly. Then, she did a 180-degree turn on the spot, swaying the rear of the car. Her driving technique was elegant and beautiful. This made the people hiding in the other 3 cars want to give chase. They really didn't expect that their young master would be kidnapped. Logically speaking, that shouldn't have happened. How could their young master not have noticed? Indeed, Chin-mo had noticed it long ago. Ever since he had entered the cafe, the youngster's gaze had been on the cup of coffee beside his hand, as though asking him why he hadn't drunk it yet. Chin-mo had wanted to see what exactly she was up to. Hence, he had taken the opportunity to drink the coffee so that she would be more obedient after revealing her true colors. Even he did not expect that this guy was trying to kidnap him. Chin-mo lifted the corners of his lips subconsciously. But he wouldn't let the youngster see his emotions. He sat in the back seat, looking extremely weak. He was really dizzy. He raised his fingers and pressed them against his temples. Through his gaze, he could vaguely see the light. Chin-mo knew that the fox-like youngster was still wondering if he had really taken the medicine. He had to make her feel at ease. Chin-mo closed his eyes and leaned his head against the window while the drug was still in effect. The Almighty's current state was extremely alluring. His handsome face was slightly pale from the effects of the medicine. His wrists were handcuffed and his black hair fell down. His pure black lashes made him look abstinent. The navigation system vibrated. "You're the little vixen that Master fancied when he was outside." Little vixen. Chin-mo's fingers stilled. He wanted to open his eyes but in the end, he resisted the urge. After all, he wanted to see what else she would do to kidnap him. Bojo heaved a sigh of relief when she saw no reaction from Chin-mo. The medicine is finally taking effect. It wasn't easy. All that's left is to activate the automatic detection mode and plan a new route. Master, it doesn't seem that simple. The navigation system activated and a 3-dimensional image appeared on the screen. There are more cars than I expected. I thought there would only be 2 or 3. There were already 7 to 8 flashing red dots. The situation seemed bad. Bojo arched a brow. It didn't look like a police car, but she didn't have much time to think. With a loud swoosh, she drove the black Lamborghini through the crowd of cars, shaking off the car closest to her. She was sitting in front so she couldn't hear Chin-mo's voice. "Young master, how are you? We have been following you and the locator is normal. We have set up a roadblock at the traffic light ahead. Once we reach it, the car will definitely not be able to pass." When they had said this, they had thought they would receive a signal to take action. Unexpectedly, the beeping sound from the watch was for them to retreat. Retreat? The shadows who were wearing headphones were a little confused. What about the roadblock? Retreat. Chin-mo's fingers moved slightly as he tapped on the watch. Even the roadblock was to be removed. The shadow guards glanced at each other. They had no choice but to follow their young master's instructions. They could more or less understand the meaning behind their young master's gaze. Simply put, all of you move away, don't hinder me from being kidnapped. In an instant, the inner thoughts of the shadows became more active, and the barricades that were blocking their way were removed. Even the speed of the chase was reduced from 100% to 70%, 60%, 100%, until they couldn't see the Lamborghini anymore. The shadow guards stopped moving and looked at the blinking red dot. They comforted themselves that it was fine, their young master's location was still there. But, what exactly was their young master thinking? Bojo, who had shaken off all the cars, was elated. She whistled and sighed. It's not easy to kidnap the Almighty. The shadow guards could hear the sound. When they heard her words, they looked up at the sky and thought to themselves, young master has been cooperative enough. If he hadn't, you wouldn't have been able to kidnap him. Why do I feel that young master is happy to be kidnapped by young Master Joe? Let me tell you something. What? When young master came out of the cafe just now, he seemed to be smiling. It was clearly a kidnapping. Why did they get a taste of dog food? On the other side, the Lamborghini was already on the bridge. Bojo was still troubled. Little Blackie, what should I do if the Almighty continues to ignore me after he wakes up? Master, as expected, the little vixen's presence has affected your judgment. No one likes to be kidnapped. It's normal for him to ignore you. There were lines on the navigation system. He was extremely serious. The important thing is that he is kidnapped. Bojo glanced over and raised her eyebrows. She smiled. That's right. Bojo, who had been dealing with all kinds of unexpected situations, didn't know what Chin Mo had ordered. If she had known, she wouldn't have been so worried. Of course, Chin Mo wouldn't let her know either. From the start, young Master Chin was a perfect kidnapper. He was weak and handsome, just like a young master who had fallen from grace. Time trickled by. Dusk fell. The castle in the forest gave off a mysterious vibe that was difficult to get close to. Under the last rays of the setting sun, the Lamborghini drove into the courtyard. The old butler, who was dressed in a well-ironed suit and had British blood, was already standing there. There was a drowsy owl perched on the branch. It had to be said that this was a scene that would only appear in a comic book. If it wasn't for the modern Lamborghini that broke the harmony. The old butler opened his pocket watch. Even though it was a little late, they could still make it for dinner. Not bad. Bojo didn't call for help. Instead, she bent down and carried Chin Mo out. She smiled faintly. Brother Mo, you won't be in the mood to tour when you wake up tomorrow. I'll have to say this now. Welcome to my castle. Chin Mo didn't react. In a sense, he was asleep. Young lord. The old butler walked over. He was still holding his pocket watch. His gaze landed on Chin Mo's face. He looked back and forth. As expected of the family's grandson. That was what the old butler said. Deep down, he was thinking about something else. Did this youngster look down on his young lord? Was that why his young lord wanted to kidnap him? It had to be said that the old butler had a certain level of misunderstanding. Chin Mo wasn't aware of this. All he could feel was a certain someone holding on to him. Her breathing wasn't steady. Her sweet scent seeped into his nose. He could hear her saying, "This is my room. You'll definitely like it." The next moment, he was placed on the soft bed. His breathing didn't weaken. Instead, it became clearer. It was so clear that it made one's heart itch. Chin Mo didn't have any energy. When he heard that Bojo wanted to leave, he tilted his body. His arm pressed down on her waist naturally. Bojo paused. Her clear eyes swept over the handsome face that was so close to her. Everything seemed like a dream. The Almighty had really been kidnapped by her. It felt as though they had returned to their younger days when they had slept face to face. But Bojo knew that this peace was temporary. When the Almighty woke up, he would definitely ignore her. She reached out and hugged Chin Mo's waist. "I don't care, it's mine." This was the only thing she could say now. Bojo wanted to leave right after declaring her ownership. But in this position, it would take some time for her to break free. When her nose brushed past, her lips had to slide past Chin Mo's lips before she could move his arm away. MMH. She had to take advantage of the Almighty now. But it was hard to say who would be the one taking advantage. With his eyes closed, Chin Mo could feel the softness of her lips. There was even a hint of sweetness. Darkness descended. Bojo walked out of the room. Chin Mo, who was lying on the bed, slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were the same as usual, so deep that they seemed to be able to emit starlight, words for the readers, 4-in-1. Moi, good night. Chapter 1100. Young master, how are you? A hissing sound rang in his ears, along with some static noise. It was probably because he was in the castle that the signal of the earphones was affected. Chin Mo had always been cautious. Even though there was no one around, he didn't speak. Instead, he lightly tapped his watch twice. It meant that he didn't make any moves. After the shadow guards received the order, they asked tentatively, "Do we need to set up an ambush?" No need. Even though they couldn't hear young master's voice, they could feel his nonchalance when he said those two words. "Is there anything wrong with your body?" They heard young master Joe say that he drugged young master. Finally, one of the shadow guards mustered up the courage to ask this question. Chin Mo felt dizzy and didn't reply. The shadow guards didn't continue asking, mainly because Madame was also around. If Madame asked where young master went, how were they going to answer? Forget it, they would wait for Madame to ask this question and then consult young master. The sound from the earphones was gone. Chin Mo felt the softness of the bed and the sweetness of the candy around him. He raised his eyebrows. What kind of kidnapping was this? If he didn't do anything after kidnapping, what kind of kidnapping was this? With this thought, Chin Mo couldn't resist the sleepiness anymore. This time, he really closed his eyes. The next day, Chin Mo wasn't in a good mood. Since he was the one who kidnapped him and brought him home, shouldn't he be in front of him? After that guy left last night, it was already 10 o'clock now. He didn't even show his face. What was the meaning of this? Breakfast was delivered by the old butler with the dining cart. Even in front of Chin Mo, the old butler maintained his ancient elegance and politely treated his guests. He naturally ignored Chin Mo's handcuffed hands. "Sir, do you prefer Chinese food or Western food?" Chin Mo didn't answer this question. Instead, he said calmly, "It's not appropriate for the master to not show his face." Chin Mo's words made the old butler take another look at him. He raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Sir, you're right. But young master has other things to do. After he's done, he will come and see you." Chin Mo only said 2 words to this. The old butler put down the dishes. When he walked downstairs, he glanced at his pocket watch. Young master had already washed the car outside for more than 2 hours. If he continued to wash it, he would have to pay more for the water bill. Xiao He, the Lamborghini, also sensed its master's abnormality. "Master, you've already cleaned my car mirror 10 times. If you continue, my beautiful skin will break." The curve on the navigation was very obvious. The internet says that it's not good for the car to keep washing it. Bojo arched a brow and continued splashing water. "I'm doing this because I love you. Think about it, you haven't bathed for half a year. In human terms, you have to peel off a layer of skin to be clean. Then when master is bathing me, can you please not step on me and stare at the window on the 2nd floor? This is an insult to my high intelligence." "You must be thinking about that little vixen," the navigation system said angrily. "Little Blackie, based on your observation of little vixen yesterday, do you think he will forgive me for kidnapping him?" Bojo didn't retort, instead, she sighed deeply, her slender body sprawled on the ground. "He won't." The navigation system wavered. "Master, are you crazy? Why would anyone forgive a kidnapper?" As a qualified smart sports car, I helped master do some research. You should sleep as much as you want when dealing with a kidnapper. Bojo thought about it. She felt guilty. If I sleep with him now, he will definitely stare at me. Sigh, why does the person I like have to be so rich? The almighty and unyielding, the almighty's dungeon was too difficult. The old butler stood at the door, taking in everything. He was even more certain that the grandson of the Inn family didn't fancy his young lord. He really had no taste. The old butler frowned in disapproval. Bojio smiled when she saw him, her eyes brightening. How is it? Grandfather Butler, has the almighty had breakfast? My cooking probably isn't to his liking. The old butler changed his words. Bojio was smart enough to realize that he was comforting her. Her gaze dimmed. The old butler had never seen such a young lord before. He had to find a time to ask that man what he liked. What was wrong with his young lord? Even though she felt guilty, she didn't want the almighty to starve. She took the tray and prepared to head upstairs. At this moment, Bojio was exceptionally polite as she knocked on the door. Chi Nemo lay on the bed, his expression indifferent. Since when did kidnappers become so polite? Bojio's fingers paused. She pushed the door open, her eyes smiling. Brother Mo, change your mood and treat me as a guest. That way, you won't be so angry. Guest? Chi Nemo tugged on the metal chain, his attitude cold. Using this method. Bojio sat down, her lids lowered. I don't want to either, Brother Mo is too formidable. What if he escapes? I've tried this chain before, it doesn't hurt. Should I give you a good review? Bojio could hear the mockery in his tone. Brother Mo, I know you're angry but you have to eat. Don't skip your meal, your stomach will hurt. How am I supposed to eat when you're tying me up? Chi Nemo replied calmly. Bojio's brain short-circuited. She replied instinctively, that's easy, Sugar Daddy will feed you. She originally thought that the Almighty would glare at her until she turned into a black man. Unexpectedly, the Almighty merely scanned her from head to toe, remaining silent. Bojio grew bolder. It hadn't been easy to get her hands on him. She wanted to make use of the time to do everything she wanted. She held the bowl of pork and century egg congee in her left hand and the spoon in her right. She touched the glossy lips with it. Chi Nemo didn't open his mouth at first. Bojio watched him. He wasn't even willing to eat the food she fed him. Since you're the one who tied me up, you have to watch over me, Chi Nemo said slowly. Don't tease me just now. Bojio found a good excuse. I was washing my car. Chi Nemo smirked. Washing for 3 hours. Bojio. Little Blackie must have been speaking too loudly and the Almighty must have heard. Bojio had never seen such a cold and violent Almighty before. She couldn't help but feel frustrated. Fortunately, he ate the first mouthful of congee. Bojio was instantly motivated and fed him a second mouthful. Chi Nemo opened his mouth and swallowed the congee without a change in expression. He looked at the person who was feeding him with a deep gaze. How could there be such a happy person who allowed her to feed him a bowl of congee? His eyes were still bright, so bright that she wanted to kiss him. On this point, the two of them were of the same mind. But Bojio moved faster. She watched as Chi Nemo was quietly being fed by her and was reminded of their childhood. After the last mouthful of porridge was finished, she took the chance to lean over, sweeping her thin lips for a light kiss. But it managed to stop Chi Nemo in his tracks. Bojio knew the principle of escaping after a kiss. Otherwise, the Almighty might resist. She was already unhappy. If the Almighty didn't eat the food she fed him, it wouldn't be worth it. Chi Nemo arched a brow, looking at a certain someone. Bojio felt guilty again. She put on a serious expression. Brother Mo, there was a grain of rice at the corner of his mouth. Do you think I'll believe you? Chin Mo's tone was indiscernible. Fortunately, it wasn't disgust. Coldness was still acceptable. She didn't dare to imagine being disgusted by this person. Hence, she didn't really meet Chin Mo's gaze. After feeding him, he subconsciously wanted to hide for a while. Chin Mo spoke at this moment. Where do you intend to go? Do you think I don't need to go to the washroom? Bojo paused. The length of the metal chain is just enough to reach the washroom. It won't affect your movements. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just as Bojo was about to move again, Chin Mo spoke again. Chin Mo's voice rang again. Have you thought about the consequences of locking me up like this? I have. Bojo lowered her head slightly. She knew that she would have to face this question sooner or later. But hearing it personally was a different feeling. Was he really starting to hate her? Chin Mo swept a glance over Bojo. Then he stood up and used his other hand to pull her. He lowered his voice beside her ear. Why did you lock me up after you thought about it? I had to, Bojo replied in a low voice. It wasn't easy to tie it up. The conversation between the two of them was accurately transmitted to the other side. The shadow guards glanced at each other. They were all slightly shocked. They were shocked by their young master's acting skills. Young Master Joe definitely didn't know how cooperative young master had been when he had tied him up. Now, he was definitely making young Master Joe feel guilty. The shadow guards wanted to hear the rest of the conversation. Chin Mo seemed to have thought of something. He retracted his hand and slid his fingers over his watch strap. This time, they couldn't hear anything. The shadow guards looked up at the sky. Young Master's tricks were really deep. Bojo was surprised that the Almighty would let her off so easily. She thought that he had grabbed her up to give her a beating. But on second thought, with the Almighty's upbringing, he wouldn't hit a woman no matter how angry he was. I need to take a shower. Chin Mo looked at the youngster's head. Since you call yourself a sugar daddy, don't tell me you don't know how to do such a simple thing. Bojo looked up and blinked. Chin Mo's handsome face was cold. How do I remove my clothes? I'm good at that. Bojo smiled. She looked as though she could take advantage of him again. A hint of a smile flashed past Chin Mo's eyes. But there wasn't a hint of emotion on his face. Instead, his expression turned colder. Oh. I'll help Brother Mo, Bojo said as she unbuttoned his shirt. She smiled faintly. It's a small matter. This time, she was really taking advantage of him unscrupulously. She didn't have to worry about being oppressed by the Almighty. She had to admit that Chin Mo was indeed ridiculously good-looking. Especially when he was standing tall with his messy black hair. He lowered his head to look at her, allowing her to pull his shirt open to reveal his beautiful abs. He was so handsome that it made her heart beat faster. Done. Bojo's ears turned red. Chin Mo arched a brow. I don't have the habit of bathing in trousers. Bojo watched as his hand was locked. She gritted her teeth and reached out to unbutton his trousers. But the moment she touched it, she retracted her hand. It was scalded. Bojo glanced up instinctively. Chin Mo's expression was indifferent. If you can't do it, undo the chains and let me do it myself. Brother Mo, there's no use trying to provoke me. Bojo smiled, looking slightly devilish. I'll continue. Chin Mo watched as she lowered her head. Who said that provocation didn't work? His motive wasn't to get her to undo the chains. His gaze dimmed as he waited for the youngster to continue. Bojo reached her hand over. She thought for a moment and decided to negotiate. Brother Mo, can you make it less hot? I'm a normal man. Qin Mo's words denied Bojio's intentions. Bojio had no choice. She braced herself and tried her best to avoid the scalding heat. She unzipped his zipper. Once the zipper was unzipped, everything else became easier. But Qin Mo, who wasn't restrained by his clothes, couldn't shift his gaze away. Especially since he was wearing a black t-shirt. She was caught off guard and turned on the shower. When the hot water flowed down, a layer of mist rose. The water droplets landed on his black hair, glistening like pearls. They rolled over inch by inch, gathering on his V-line. It was a sexy mess. For some reason, Bojio's throat felt dry. Just as she was about to leave, he pulled her back. "You want me to shower with one hand?" Qin Mo's tone didn't change. "What about my back? How do I apply the shower gel?" "You have time to shower your car but not me. Why did you tie me up?" When Bojio heard this, her first reaction was to estimate the Almighty's danger level. It shouldn't be that high. She had to take advantage of him. "I wanted to go outside to get the shower gel," Bojio replied seriously. Qin Mo exposed her mercilessly. "It seems to be behind me. I didn't see it just now." Bojio smiled. "I'll help you apply it now." With that, she pressed a few buttons on the small bottle, pressing the fragrant shower gel onto her palm. Her beautiful eyes were smiling as she caressed the abs she had been yearning for. As expected, it felt good. It was cool and smooth. And there was a jade-like feeling on his chest. Bojio smiled as she took advantage of the man she wanted. She didn't notice that when she lowered her head, the man she had tied up was smiling faintly. Bojio experienced the feeling of being a sugar daddy. If only the Almighty was willing to do all of this. For instance, he would become her pet again. When they were young, he had already agreed that he was hers. But in the next second, her hand was pressed against the wall. That kind of strength was enough to prove that it was impossible for her to imagine it. Her back was pressed against the cold wall. The next moment, a man's voice rang out, carrying with it the steam of the bathroom and the warmth of the hot water. The slightly cold breath hit the back of her ears, making her heart tremble. "Who exactly are you?" The question finally came. Chapter 11:01. When she had decided to kidnap the Almighty, Bojio had predicted that once she made a move, the details would be exposed. The Almighty would definitely suspect her identity. No, that wasn't right. The Almighty would definitely suspect her identity. Because before this, the Almighty had investigated her many times. The men he had specially sent to follow her and the countless tests all proved that the Almighty had suspected that she was Z. But in China, she had taken advantage of her rebirth. But now, how was she going to explain her familiarity with the streets of New York? Xiaohei, the smart Lamborghini, and the castle were parked downstairs. The Almighty would never believe that the Fu family was that rich. In reality, she couldn't come up with anything. Anyway, she was already kidnapped. What was there to be afraid of? Bojio was decisive. Even though she was pressed against the wall, she didn't seem to have any intention of retreating. Instead, she lifted the corners of her lips, her voice seductive. "Brother Mo, have you already guessed my identity? I'll let you say it yourself." Qin Mo's thin lips were very close to her ears. He was so close that if Bojio tilted her head, she would be kissed. She had no choice but to maintain her position. She glanced up, her lashes damp. "I'm Z. I'm the Z that you've been chasing." Qin Mo's fingers paused, as though they had stopped. Bojio admired the Almighty's rare pause. She reached out and hugged his neck. "Brother Mo, don't even think about escaping. I know how to imprison people. Chi Nemo looked down at the sparkling mole. The back of his hand stiffened. He pushed her away and closed the bathroom door. Bojio almost fell when Chi Nemo pushed her. She stood outside the door, watching the closed wooden door. When she lowered her head, she felt a tinge of loneliness. Why was there such a huge reaction? She hated him. Bojio looked down at her hand. That was true. Who would like a kidnapper? Besides being a kidnapper, they had been enemies. Bojio had thought about his reaction when her identity was exposed. She could guess. She lifted her eyes and glanced at the door that had been pulled up. She listened to the rustling sounds inside. She paused for a moment before taking heavy steps out of the room. In the bathroom, Chi Nemo closed his eyes, the image of a certain someone clinging onto him. When her thin lips moved slightly, it was as though she was silently inviting him, as alluring as a water demon. However, it was clear that this was not the right time to do some things. Gradually, the restless breathing stopped. Chi Nemo grabbed a white scarf and wrapped it around his waist. He wiped his wet hair and came out, only to realize that a certain someone had disappeared again. Chi Nemo's eyes dimmed. It seemed like his sugar daddy didn't have the slightest awareness of tying him up. Sugar daddies also had their own troubles. Bojio had never been so worried before. The moment she couldn't think straight, she decided to wash the car. As a top-notch sports car, Blackie's entire body was filled with rejection. Master, put down the bucket of water in your hand. I think we should have a good chat first. The smart navigation system fluctuated. Bojio held her chin, indicating that she wasn't in the mood to chat. The navigation system knew its master best. Before the bucket of water splashed on it, it said in advance, I have a way to deal with the little vixen you like. Bojio kept the bucket and stuffed a hand into her pocket, looking carefree. Tell me, how do you want to deal with him? I just searched the internet. There are many ways, but after my computer summarized them, there are basically 3 steps. The navigation system acted as though it was serious. Kiss him, hug him, and *CK him. Bojio picked up the bucket again and splashed the water onto the Lamborghini. Little Blackie, don't read those erotic novels in the future. Master, wait, really, wait a little longer. It really didn't want to be washed again. There's a more tactful method. The first step is to confess. Bojio tilted her head and thought for a moment. That's still reliable. The second step, create romance. The navigation system continued to fluctuate. Bojio arched a brow. What's the third step? You can lie on the bed and have a heart-to-heart talk. Once the atmosphere is good, you can take another step and use your beauty to take him down. Bojio patted the Lamborghini. Not bad. Little Blackie. Their master was really tied up by a little vixen. Sigh. As long as the Almighty didn't ask her to leave, she didn't need to leave at all. Even if his attitude was a little cold. But since she was the one who kidnapped him, it would be weird if he was warm. Bojio lifted her legs and went upstairs. The moment she opened the door, she heard the deep and melodious voice. What is it? Sugar Daddy is so free to tease me again. Bojio laughed and jumped onto the bed. She looked at Chi Nemo, looking carefree. Chi Nemo couldn't predict her actions. She was so close to him that he could hear her breathing. He leaned against the headboard and she was just beside his hand. If it wasn't for the butler who always walked back and forth by the door, he would have broken the handcuffs long ago to let her experience the consequences of teasing him. Go down. Chi Mo's voice was calm, but he didn't look at her. Bojio pressed his leg with one hand and smiled. Brother Mo, why didn't you ask me why I am Z? Would you tell the truth if I asked? Chi Mo tilted his face, not a hint of emotion on his face. Bojo muttered, it's a long story. I changed my identity when I woke up and became the young master of the Fu family. I didn't mean to lie to you. You mean you became another person? Chi Mo already knew all this. He was just saying this to make the youngster maintain this position for a longer time. Bojo glanced up. I know it's hard to believe, but it's the truth. Alright, let's not talk about such an unpleasant topic. Brother Mo, why don't you ask me why I kidnapped you? The old butler was guarding the corner of the wall. When he heard his young lord's words, he thought to himself, why didn't you mention it? It would be weird if they could continue the conversation. As expected. Chin Mo's voice became faint. Why? Because I like you too much. Bojo's eyes lit up, her smile clear. I can't control myself. Chin Mo's heart skipped a beat. She was breaking the rules again. Through Chin Mo's handsome face, Bojo couldn't tell what he was feeling. She took the opportunity when he was in a daze to tilt her head and kiss his slightly cold lips. Bojo wanted to leave after the kiss. If she was pushed away, it would be too awkward. But just as she was about to move back, she heard a clattering sound. It was the sound of metal chains sliding. His wrist was pressed down by someone, and even the kiss became an existence that made him feel hot all over. She was attacked continuously. It felt as though all the air was sucked away. A numb feeling exploded from the tip of her tongue. Her waist was being hugged. In between breaths, his breath landed behind her ears. Do you think I'll allow you to tease me obediently? Bojo waited for the strength to gather. She was a little afraid to meet his eyes. She tilted her head. No. But. Chin Mo hugged the person in his arms, burying his face into her delicate and fair neck. It depends on my mood. Bojo's eyes lit up. Was there room for negotiation? Firstly, I don't feel comfortable being chained up like this. Chin Mo's tone was calm. Unlock the lock. Bojo felt that the Almighty was too cunning. He was obviously using his charm. She didn't get a response. Chin Mo opened his mouth again, his voice cold. You tied me up and threw me here. You can interfere when you want and ignore me when you don't want to. It doesn't make sense if you don't pick the lock. Or do you not believe in your skills and think you can't keep me here? Didn't you drug me? The drug is still in effect, isn't it? I'll unlock the lock. Bojo lifted her head. But Brother Mo, after I unlock the lock, don't leave. Grandfather Butler can treat your hand. If you really want to leave, I'll let you go after he's treated. Chin Mo caressed her face with his fingers and said something that couldn't be matched. Sometimes, you really seem like an idiot. Bojo was about to retort. I promise you. Chin Mo retracted his hand. He looked like a noble young master, pure and abstinent. Bojo moved her fingers, a key appearing at the tip of her fingers. The next moment, there was a loud clang. The metal chain was unlocked. Chin Mo leaned against the wall, his long legs half bent. He twisted his wrist twice, his eyes still as deep as ever. I don't have any energy, help me up. Bojo was even more certain that the Almighty wasn't that dangerous. She reached out to help him. The old butler frowned. Was it because he had given his young lord too much drug? Was that why his strength hadn't recovered? The old butler adjusted his spectacles, deciding to take a closer look. From a certain point of view, Chin Mo was indeed movie queen and son. He leaned on Bojo, his expression calm as though he really didn't have any energy left. Bojo thought about something and asked, "Were you tired when you showered just now?" "MMH," Chin Mo replied. Bojo added, "Let grandfather butler treat brother Mo's hand first." Chin Mo remained silent. Bojo thought about how she was going to look for little Blackie later to use her beauty trap. In the end, she was the one who fell for it. Fortunately, from a certain point of view, the Almighty couldn't leave yet. Bojo didn't forget her main purpose of kidnapping the Almighty. She brought her men over to the old butler. The old butler was sizing Chin Mo up. Chin Mo was trying his best to hide his sharpness. His thin lips were still pale, adding to his fragility. "Young lord, bring this guest to the basement." The old butler carried the oil lamp, leading the way. Bojo carried him without hesitation. She couldn't see the faint smile on Chin Mo's face when he lowered his lids. As for why Chin Mo did that, it was simple. Firstly, he enjoyed the feeling of being held in her hands. Secondly, he wanted to understand her. Obviously, he could only do that by staying here. There was one more point, which was also very important. She had never completely let her guard down against him. Hence, she didn't believe that he wouldn't leave even if she unlocked the door for him. There was a click. The old butler turned on the light. That was when they realized that there was a complete set of surgical equipment in the basement. There were even various instruments and human organs soaked in containers. "Please." The old butler's solemn expression was indeed frightening. Young Master Chin was probably the only one who could remain calm in front of him. Chin Mo arched a brow, his words directed at Bojo. "How am I supposed to believe that you aren't going to dissect me? You are going to treat my hand. There's no point in studying you." The old butler's voice was calm. "Young Master Chin, you are a friend that young lord brought over. Trusting the owner of this castle is the only thing you can do now." Chin Mo retracted his gaze. "What if I don't cooperate?" The old butler kept his watch. "I'm not willing to treat you either." Bojo watched as the two of them started arguing. She glanced at Chin Mo's side profile, remembering the Almighty's memory loss. Suddenly, she asked, "Brother Mo, are you afraid of lying on the bed like this?" Chin Mo's fingers stilled. He tilted his head. "What a joke, why would I be afraid?" She had to learn to think in reverse when interacting with the Almighty. If he said he wasn't afraid, he was definitely afraid. Bojo reached out to hold Chin Mo's hand. "Brother Mo, I'll watch over you. Besides, my castle is very safe, no one will come." Chin Mo's gaze swept past the youngster's face. "If you dare to take a step away, throw me out of the window," Bojo replied. Chin Mo seemed to be smiling. Bojo wasn't sure since the lighting was a little dim. "All right." Bojo glanced up at the old butler. Bojo glanced up towards the old man. "Grandfather butler." The old butler harumphed, starting to prepare the tools. As he moved his hands, he asked, "Has the injured hand been operated on before?" "Yes." Chin Mo was extremely polite. The old butler stretched out his hand and pressed his wrist that was wrapped in a white bandage. In an instant, a thin layer of sweat formed on Chin Mo's forehead. The old butler's eyes sunk. It was more serious than he had expected. Bojo observed the old man's expression, her heart sinking. In the end, the old butler didn't want to see his young lord disappointed. He fiddled with the surgical light. Even though the injury is serious and he didn't recuperate enough, it isn't completely incurable. "Lie down, I'll administer the anesthesia." Chin Mo did as he was told. He laid on the operating table, still wearing the white shirt from before. He looked like a noble, even his posture was elegant. However, the old butler met with a problem the moment he started the operation. He had used a lot of anesthesia and sleeping ingredients in the needle. But the person lying on the bed didn't seem to have any intention of falling asleep. The old butler narrowed his eyes, a sharp glint flashing past his eyes. The next moment, he stopped what he was doing. "Apologies, Mr. Chin, I have something to discuss with young Lord alone." The old butler didn't give Chin Mo a chance to reject. He reached out and pulled Bojo to the side. His voice was so soft that only the two of them could hear him. "Young Lord, do you think the effects of the anesthesia haven't worn off?" Chapter 1102. The old butler paused, frowning. "Then, young lord." He unlocked him. The old butler didn't finish his sentence. Bojo interrupted him. "That isn't important, he will leave sooner or later. The most important thing is to treat his hand before he leaves. Hence, I have to ask Grandfather Butler, a soldier's hand is too important. Even though he doesn't have a military rank now, I know he will have to return to the military one day. As for why I unlocked him, I feel that someone as handsome as him shouldn't be chained to the bed. He has such a limited range of movement. In China, he had many chances to chain me, but he only threatened me verbally and never resorted to such methods. Now that he's in my territory, I won't break his wings even though I want to keep him. Grandfather Butler, please don't be prejudiced against him, he's actually..." Bojo scratched the back of her head as though she was trying to find the right words to describe him. Then she smiled. "He's really good." The old butler retracted his gaze, not saying anything else. Basically, he couldn't say anything to his young lord's request. But when he saw how much his young lord liked someone, he couldn't help but worry. He was really worried that his young lord would get hurt. When he walked towards Chin Mo, the old butler's expression was still stern. He lifted his pocket watch and glanced at it. "The operation will take a long time, I have to put you under anesthesia. If you don't sleep, I won't be able to do the operation." Regardless of his past experience or the training he had received, he wouldn't fall asleep easily. Both the old butler and Chin Mo knew that it was a psychological reason. Chin Mo wouldn't let his guard down so easily unless he was seriously injured. Although this sounded a little strange, the problem they faced now was that they had to sleep before the surgery. The old butler assumed that Chin Mo would reject the operation. Based on his judgment, Chin Mo was meticulous and seemed polite but wasn't easy to get close to. It was destined that he wouldn't trust anyone. Besides, his young lord had kidnapped him and invited him over. He would probably be more resistant, however, the old butler hadn't expected this. At this moment, Chin Mo, who was lying on the operating table, suddenly reached out to grab her wrist. His voice was calm. "All right, I'm going to sleep now." "All right?" The old butler was stunned when he saw this scene. He watched as the man slowly closed his eyes and turned to look at his young master. Bojo replied proudly, "I can put you to sleep." The old butler reached out to push in the new anesthetic needle. At this moment, the elegant young Master Chin's muscles actually relaxed. Just how assured was he? Only then would he lower his guard in front of that person. This was extremely difficult for those who had undergone special training. It seemed like young Master Chin didn't care about young Master. The old butler's heart finally relaxed a little. When the surgery started, the medicine started to take effect. Chin Mo's hand started to loosen, but he still wanted to hold on to a certain someone. It was as if this was the only way he would not be swallowed by the emptiness that came from the depths of his heart. But he couldn't catch it. He couldn't grab it no matter how hard he tried. Oh no! This was the old butler's first reaction. This surgery required the patient's complete cooperation. Otherwise, the slightest movement would cripple his hand. But Chin Mo, who was lying on the operating table, seemed to have been agitated. The thin sweat that seeped out of his forehead had already drenched his black hair. Even his body was filled with extreme unease. It seemed like he was having a nightmare, but it wasn't exactly. But if he continued moving like this, the surgery would definitely fail. Young lord. The old butler who was wearing a surgical mask said hoarsely, "Hold him down, you have to hold him down." Bojo looked at the fragile person on the operating table. She didn't know what to do. Yes, for the first time in her life, she didn't know what to do. If it had been someone else, she would have used brute force to calm him down. Otherwise, she would have knocked him out. But it wasn't someone else, it was Chin-mo. He was the only person she had wanted to hold in her palms ever since she was young. Young lord. The old butler pressed down on Chin-mo's shoulders. From his expression, it was obvious that he was trying his best to suppress the other party. When the old butler turned back, he saw Bojo's face. His voice lowered. Young lord, the old butler had only seen this side of Bojo once. When his master had died. That youngster had stood in front of the gravestone. Her eyes had lost their luster and she didn't know what to do. Now, young lord, the old butler opened his mouth, wanting to say something. Bojo suddenly lowered her lids and raised Chin-mo's hand, her thin lips landing on it. The kiss was so natural. Brother Mo, I'm here too. The youngster's clear voice echoed in the quiet basement, adding an indescribable warmth. I'm here too. Regardless of what was in your dream or what you were experiencing, you weren't alone. Chin-mo was indeed dreaming. Once he was in such an environment, he would enter a deep sleep. That kind of dream would come out. It was an endless stretch of water. His entire body was in the water, trying his best to grab hold of the other party. But that person fell deeper and deeper, until the darkness engulfed everything. No matter how painful it was, even if it tore his heart apart, it was useless. Because he couldn't save her anymore. Until he felt a warmth on his palm. Only then did Chin-mo stop moving. He opened his hand and finally grasped something. It wasn't cold water anymore. It was a person's body temperature. That kind of body temperature always made him feel comfortable. It was so comfortable that for a period of time, when he woke up, he felt as though he was hugging a little son. Suddenly, the dream changed. Chin-mo frowned. Chin-mo frowned because he had never dreamed of such a dream before. A little girl with soft black hair was hugging him. She was wearing tiger pajamas and had a pair of furry ears. He couldn't see her face clearly, but he could vaguely feel that she was cute. Her face was rubbing against his shoulder as though she hadn't woken up. Her voice was warm, like a little kitten, with a nice milky scent on her body. Her entire body was soft and her words were like a fox's. I'll sleep a little more, just a little more. Since I've hugged you to sleep so many times, it doesn't matter if I do it once more. At most, I'll let you hug me to sleep. Chin-mo's deep eyes weren't completely focused on the little girl. He could clearly feel that in this dream, his hands and body had become smaller. It was as though he had returned to when he was 4 or 5 years old. Chapter 1103. Why was this happening? In the dream, Chin-mo paused. He retracted his gaze and looked at the furry head in his arms. What was even stranger was that he was talking in his dream. If you don't wake up, there won't be any milk to drink. You won't be able to grow taller. The tiger-like girl in his arms leaned against his neck. Her voice was clearer. How should I say this, Momo? I'm taller than you, you don't have to worry about this. He seemed to have clenched his fist. His chest was filled with anger. He reached out to pull her away. Boys grow slower than girls. Don't you know this common sense? The little tiger shook her head. No, I'm young. I don't know anything. Whenever she faced a problem, she would say that she was young. In the dream, he was obviously too young and didn't have much patience. He gritted his teeth in anger. Are you forcing me to throw you out of the window? Momo, how many times have I told you? Life is beautiful, but you're too hot-tempered. Don't be like this. You're getting old. When the little tiger said this, she was as serious as she could be. She was so serious that Mo wanted to see who exactly she was. But the dream was slipping away. Every part of it was a mess. It wasn't connected at all. When he wanted to know something, the light turned bright. The light suddenly became bright, and when it hit the eyes, it was a vast expanse of white thorns. Mo wanted to raise his hand to block the light, but his wrist was pressed down. The next moment, a clear and familiar voice could be heard. Brother Mo, hold on for a while. Hold on. Mo tried to open his eyes. He glanced sideways at the person beside him. She was holding on to his wrist. Her body temperature was just right. When he saw that face, Mo remembered that he was still on the operating table. Done. The old butler heaved a sigh of relief. The surgery seemed simple since it wasn't a brain surgery. However, there were meridians on the wrist. The details had to be controlled very strictly. If one wasn't a top-notch doctor, they wouldn't be able to perform this surgery. This was related to experience and skills. But even so, the old butler still lifted his hand to wipe the sweat off his forehead. This was enough to prove that this surgery wasn't easy. Everything returned to normal. Mo fell into a light sleep. Bojo stood there, watching the sleeping almighty. She placed one hand on the operating table and tilted her handsome face. She bent down and kissed his face. Such a scene. After the operation was over, there was an indescribable sense of warmth. When the old butler took off the white medical gloves, his movements paused for a moment. It was probably because he knew that with young master's status, it was impossible for him to have good feng shui with young Master Qin. The reason why the two of them were here, including the young master's method of tying someone up, even if it was just for a few days, was probably because she was Mo wouldn't wake up anytime soon. Bojo took the opportunity to talk to little Blackie. After the Lamborghini was opened, the navigation system continued with the previous procedure. The first thing it asked was the result. Master, how is it? Have you already taken him down? A honey trap is not a good idea. Bojo turned the steering wheel. Brother Mo doesn't have much time here, we have to do something romantic. Romantic? Was pouncing on the other party not romantic enough? The navigation system felt that it couldn't understand human thought. But this didn't affect how cool it was. Master, I just went to summarize, 90% of the netizens think that drugging is the fastest. Bojo arched a brow. Shallow, I don't just want to sleep with the Almighty. The navigation system vibrated. Master, forgive me for being direct, but when I mentioned drugging, the seat detected that your heart was beating twice as fast as before, which means that you were tempted by my suggestion. Little Blackie. Bojo moved her fingers and was about to turn off the navigation system. The navigation system shouted, Master, there was an error in my procedure just now. I suspect that someone planted a virus in my body. If not, why would I say such an error? Good. Bojo held on to the steering wheel and made a turn, heading towards the long bridge. This was the direction towards Fifth Avenue. A few black men who were scribbling on a certain street kept their things when they saw the car. They were on high alert as though they were guarding against thieves. Bojo intentionally lowered the car window to greet them. It was obvious that the black men didn't appreciate this. They didn't dare to leave even if they wanted to. F***. Come, I have a cigarette. Bojo opened the car door and walked out, placing her arm lazily on one of the black men's shoulders. Are we brothers? The black man. Who's your brother? How about this, I'll ask for some information and we'll calculate it according to the price in your industry. Bojo passed him a cigarette. The black man accepted it since no one would say no to money. It's on the street next door, the place where the movie is being filmed. Did anything happen? Bojo tied him up. Of course, she was most concerned about movie Queen Anne's reaction. Did the police receive any missing person reports recently? The black man stretched his hand out, 5 fingers full. Bojo pressed his hand, allowing him to retract 1 finger. This is the price in the industry. If there's anything more valuable, increase the price. Didn't you just say that we are brothers? The black man couldn't help but retaliate. Bojo looked at him and smiled. There's a saying in China, even blood brothers should settle their debts clearly. With that, she took out a few foreign currency notes and stuffed them into the black man's shirt pocket. Tell me about your information. Everything about the movie is normal. The police are not looking for anyone, but there is a case that is quite strange. After the black guy finished speaking, he waited for the person to ask him. Generally, if the other party took the initiative to ask, the price would definitely rise. Unexpectedly, the youngster arched a brow. Oh, I'm not interested. The black man. F***, that's not how my script is supposed to be. Hey, brother, wait a minute. The black man saw that Bojo was about to leave, reaching out and grabbing onto the youngster's wrist. Wait a minute, this information is really worth it, we can discuss the price. Bojo paused, stretching out 2 fingers. The black man gritted his teeth, bending the youngster's fingers, adding 1 more. This price, I can't go any lower. All right. Bojo stuffed 1 hand into her pocket. What's strange about the case? The black man glanced around. This is insider information, I'm not sure if you've heard of these words. Bojo tilted her head, lighting a cigarette, signaling for him to continue. The maiden's sacrifice, the black man said. Bojo narrowed her eyes. Tell me about it. The police aren't sure yet, but the people in the underworld are saying that the other party knows hypnosis, it's for the sake of the sacrifice. Bojo listened to the black man's endless supply of information, her hand in her pocket tightening. There's something that the police should have noticed, their targets are all Chinese. Bojo took out another foreign currency, stuffing it into the black man's hand. Hey, that's too much. The black man took a look. Bojo waved her hand. Your information is worth this price. After saying that, she walked into the phone booth in the same way as before. Everything on this street seemed to have been bewitched. Even if it was just an old man in a traditional Chinese suit, one shouldn't underestimate him. There were many secrets, but they were all in the underworld, not for outsiders to know. After Bojo entered the warehouse, the first thing she did was switch on the computer. After locking onto the case, her fingers flew across the keyboard, forming a light wave that quickly entered a local area network. She switched to a fake IP, shook off the first wave of interceptions, and continued to hack. But Bojo hadn't expected the case's encryption level to be so high. S-grade. It seemed like they were afraid of causing panic. Bojo paused for a moment, her handsome face tilted slightly. There must be a breakthrough. But she had to be fast. The system here was very powerful. If she wasn't fast enough, she would be easily discovered. Fortunately, this was Fifth Avenue, the equipment Bojo used was the most advanced. If it was a normal laptop, it wouldn't be able to keep up. Found it. Bojo pressed the spacebar, changing the direction of the intrusion. A dialog box popped up, countless codes changing continuously. In the end, she tore a small hole, as though she was performing a magic trick. Because Bojo used the other party's IP address, this would cause her to disappear from the defense network for 5 seconds. 5 seconds was enough. The intrusion was complete. After obtaining the information, she was thinking of a way to leave. A skilled hacker didn't simply hack. Instead, after the intrusion, he would wipe away all traces of the intrusion, not causing any damage. Bojo tilted her head, watching the completion of the program. In an instant, she unplugged the USB. She looked at the information on another computer. Every picture showed that this wasn't a simple suicide. Especially one of them, there was a smile on his face, as though he wasn't in any pain. Bojo narrowed her eyes. Then she seemed to have discovered something, enlarging the picture and locking onto the girl's arm. Needle mark. It seemed like the person wasn't content after escaping. Bojo kept the USB, glancing at the time. The information had to wait until she returned. It wasn't a suitable time to sneak into the police station. Besides, she should show these things to the Almighty, she should be able to get more clues. Bojo was clear that even if she had kidnapped him, the Almighty wouldn't reject anything related to his safety. She could make the way she received the information more romantic. Bojo glanced up, her gaze landing on the row of drones on the second floor. Dusk started to fall. Dusk in the suburbs was always exceptionally beautiful. The European-style castle was surrounded by roses, blooming with an enchanting fragrance. When Chinamo opened his eyes, the first thing he smelled was the fragrance of black tea. His entire arm was secured by bandages, there wasn't a single gap. Other than that, there shouldn't be anything else inside. Chinamo felt a slight numbness in his fingers, everything else was normal. But was it a habit for a certain someone to leave him alone on the bed? Chinamo sat up, not seeing the metal chains. His gaze deepened, his fingers caressing the blinking dots on his watch. A voice came from the earpiece. "Young master, you finally turned on the receiver, thank God." Chinamo stood up, facing the excitement on the other side, choosing a white shirt prepared for him. His voice was calm. "What's the matter?" "Madam asked us where you and young Master Joe went." The shadow guards didn't know how to answer this question. Chinamo stood tall, buttoning the buttons on his wrist, his voice extremely natural. "Tell Madam that someone brought me to meet her parents, we can only go back in a few days." The shadow guards. Meet her parents. Only their young master could describe a kidnapping in such a fresh and refined way. They face-bombed. Chinamo looked up at the mirror and adjusted his collar. "Also, don't disturb me." The shadow guards. "Young master, you really aren't like how you were when you were in front of young Master Joe. It's too obvious that you are a hypocrite." Then, Chinamo didn't speak. Because he was thinking about something, about the dream he had during the operation. A dream was a reflection of a person's psychology, or the remnants of memory and foresight. He studied psychology, so he was very clear about this. But Chinamo didn't understand why he had such a dream. Because when he was young, he didn't know anyone, let alone hugging a little girl to sleep. If it was someone else, they would definitely think that it was a dream. But Chinamo was different. In the dream, he didn't see the little girl's face. This became an unsolvable mystery. Who exactly was she? Maybe he should find time to investigate himself. After all, Chinmo's eyes deepened, just as he was about to speak. At this moment, suddenly, a voice came from outside the window. It was clear and pleasant. Brother Mo. It was that fellow. Chinamo raised a brow. Bojo stood outside, her hands pressing on something, her voice unusually loud. Brother Mo walked to the window, I'll show you something fun. That voice was indeed louder. Moreover, Chin Mo's receiver wasn't switched off. Even the shadow guards heard this sentence. They looked at each other curiously. What did young Master Joe want to show young Master? Chin Mo wanted to know too. He walked to the window. The moment he opened the curtains, he saw a white heart-shaped pattern on the blue sky that was washed by the sunlight. Two small drones created this pattern. They used the white fog that was released by dry ice to form a heart. The person operating the drone was standing under the sunset. She had a slender figure, and there was a smile on her face. Her mole shone, and her silver hair fluttered in the wind. Her face was so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off her. At this moment, she raised her head, her black eyes beautiful. She asked him like a child, "Brother Mo, do you like my present?" Chapter 1104. The white gas formed a heart in the air, looking like a marshmallow. The lingering scent of dusk and the white clouds in the blue sky. Everything was different because of someone's existence. At that moment, even the air was filled with a slight sweetness. Chin Mo could feel his heartbeat. If it wasn't for the restricted conditions, he would probably have hugged the only person who could disturb him. That was the only way to calm the restlessness in his blood. Fortunately, one of them was upstairs while the other was downstairs, so he hadn't lost his mind. Just looking at that face, his gaze couldn't help turning gentle. Chin Mo didn't even notice this. On the other hand, the shadows who had heard the commotion asked, "Young Master, what happened?" That should be young Master Joe's voice, right? But it was a little blurry. They couldn't hear it clearly. Chin Mo didn't retract his gaze. He stood by the window with one hand in his pocket. His voice was calm. "Nothing much, someone just confessed to me." The shadow guards, wait a minute, the person who confessed was young Master Joe. They had wanted to ask more questions. Unexpectedly, the usually aloof young master opened his mouth again at this moment. "If you really want me to describe what kind of confession scene it was, I can also tell you. A certain someone got two drones from God knows where and was controlling them remotely. He used the exhaust to draw a heart in the sky for me." The shadows. "Young master, when you say these words, can you not smile? Of course, you are still single so you probably won't be able to enjoy such treatment." Chin Mo's voice was calm as usual. But the shadow guards could still hear the boastful tone in his voice. Chin Mo glanced downstairs. "All right, I have to go down to receive the gifts. If not, a certain someone might cry." The shadow guards, why did they have to communicate with their young master about the kidnapping? Ever since their young master had been kidnapped, there hadn't been a day when they weren't showing off their love. In the courtyard, Bojo kept the remote control. She was still a little shy and nervous. After all, she had never confessed like this before. She felt that it was rather romantic, but she didn't know what the Almighty was thinking. But there was one thing. With Bojo's confession, the few kids who had wanted to get close to the castle but didn't dare to, all ran over. Their snow-white skin, blue eyes, and soft golden short hair made them look like little angels. Their cheeks were all pink. One of the boys was still wearing a small shirt and pants. He was looking at the drone in the sky. There were 3 other children beside him. They were all American natives. They were around 4 years old and looked very pretty. They could not help but exclaim, "Wow!" Row after row of them stood there, the amazement on their faces was obvious. "Big brother." The youngest girl tugged at the sleeves of the little boy. She was probably only 3 years old and spoke in English. She raised her hand and pointed. "Beautiful." The little boy lowered his head and helped her wipe the corner of her mouth that had just finished eating the cream cake. Then he said, "When you grow up, I'll give you this for your birthday." Okay. When the little girl nodded her head, she was so cute that she almost melted. The main reason was that the boy was always on guard, telling her not to get too close to the castle. This scene reminded her of her childhood. At that time, the Almighty had been like this too. He had given her everything he could. But from the start, she had really treated the Almighty as a little girl. Bojo arched a brow. Fortunately, the Almighty had forgotten about it. Otherwise, with his personality, he would definitely bring up the past. With that thought, Bojo smiled and walked out of the castle. When the little kids saw Bojo coming out, they panicked. All of them were a little panicked, and they started to speak in English. God, did you see that person's eyes? They are black. She definitely knows magic. We will be cursed like the dwarves in Snow White. What should we do? The little girl turned and asked, "Big brother, what should we do?" The 4-year-old boy was nervous as well, but he still had to protect Bojo. He moved forward and watched her approach cautiously. He didn't forget to explain, "Asians have black eyes. Don't you guys watch TV?" Bojo smiled. "Ah, that's right." Children immersed in the world of magic couldn't understand sometimes. It was probably because they were already prepared for this place. For example, they had heard stories about vampires coming out to bite them if they didn't listen. Hence, as Bojo approached, they were still afraid. They even wanted to turn and run. But both of their legs seemed to be nailed to the ground. That person was already very close to them. "Big brother, will he eat us?" The little girl gripped her sleeves tighter when she saw Bojo walking towards them. The little boy blocked her and took a step back. He was about to tell the person in front of him to leave. The person bent over and handed him a drone with a faint smile. "This is for you. You don't have to wait for you to grow up. You can give this to the little kid behind you now." The little boy didn't accept it since his family had told him not to accept things with unknown origins. Bojo found it interesting. He was just like the Almighty when he was young, always rational. "It seems like you are worried. How about this, I'll leave it here and you can play with it. I'll be heading back for dinner." Bojo placed the drone on the ground and turned to head back to the castle. The little boy turned back to look at the little girl's eyes. He knew that she wanted to play. He lowered his head to make sure there wasn't any danger. Then he looked up and shouted at the slender back view, "Thank you." The old butler watched from inside the castle. He was envious. In this aspect, his young lord seemed to have a natural affinity. Unlike him, the children didn't want the candy he gave them. Even so, the old butler wouldn't let others see his loneliness. He raised his hand to look at his pocket watch. After seeing his young lord's rare confession, it was time for him to prepare dinner. Come to think of it, it wasn't bad for young Master Qin to stay here. Compared to the past, his young lord was rarely so energetic. She was smiling every day. It wasn't like the past. Even her smile wasn't so bright. She did everything alone. Other than him, there wasn't anyone else accompanying his young lord. Now that the old butler was getting on in years, sometimes he would wonder what his young lord would do if he wasn't around anymore. In this huge castle, his young lord would really be the only one left. His young lord might seem approachable, but in reality, it wasn't easy to get close. This was probably the trait of the Asians. Fortunately, his young lord had someone she wanted. Even though the old butler knew that this person's identity wasn't suitable for her, money couldn't buy his young lord's love. The old butler smiled. If that was the case, he should find some time to invest in the family. He had to admit that the old butler was definitely close. His way of thinking wasn't too far off. On the other side, when Qin Mo walked down, Bojo had just finished sending the drone into the courtyard. Chinamo stuffed a hand into his pocket, his gaze deepening as he looked at her. You're giving a gift to someone else. I don't understand your sincerity at all. Bojo paused. The one for Brother Mo is in the sky. The drone is also a part of the gift. Was Chinamo that childish? If it was up to him, why would he give something to someone else? Bojo caressed the bridge of her nose. She didn't reply. She hadn't expected the Almighty to be so obsessed with the drone. Chinamo tilted his head. His face was still good-looking. Besides, you gave it to a kid. Will he know how to play with it? Bojo smiled. Brother Mo, I only gave one drone. I still have another one. With that, she took the other drone out from the bushes and passed it to Chinamo. At this moment, the communication device was still switched on. The shadow guards only had one thought after listening to the entire process. Their young master was so petty that he was even jealous of a kid. How scary. But Chinamo had his own thoughts. He caressed the wings of the drone with his fingers and lifted the corner of his mouth. Bojo glanced at his handsome face and muttered softly, he really looks like him. She didn't expect the Almighty to hear her. Chinamo turned, his voice calm. What does he look like? Nothing, I'm just saying that the little boy looks like my childhood friend. Bojo couldn't possibly say that she had given him the drone because he looked like his childhood friend. That was the perfect explanation for Bojo. Unexpectedly, Chinamo laughed coldly. Is that so? Bojo couldn't tell if the Almighty was happy or unhappy. Hadn't he laughed just now? Why did it seem like, which type do you like? Chinamo asked again, his tone not casual. For example, those who act mature at the age of 4 or 5. Bojo paused. How was she going to answer this question? From a psychological point of view, this type of boy is very shrewd. Chinamo arched a brow. You're so dumb. You definitely can't tell how good your little friend is. Bojo didn't reply because it was hard for her to hold back her laughter. After all, it was really interesting to hear the Almighty ridiculing himself. What else? What's so bad about this type of boy? Bojo cleared her throat and asked seriously. Chinamo stood there, his tone calm. There are many, but you don't have to understand so much. I'm the one you should understand. With that, Chinamo walked into the castle. Bojo paused for a second. Thinking about his words. Once she tasted sweetness in her mouth, she walked to the Lamborghini and started the engine. She lowered her voice. Little Blackie, I think my confession seems to have worked. If it doesn't have any effect, I'm starting to suspect that the person you like is gay. The navigation system fluctuated. But, Master, is it really appropriate to use this method of chasing girls on a boy? Bojo lifted her lips. Why not? I'm going to continue understanding my little secretary. You're in charge of searching for information. I'll do some research later. What information? The navigation system didn't understand. Didn't Master always think that the information it found was too simple and crude? Bojo smiled. Of course it's to find out which type is good and doesn't have any side effects. Also, it allows me to do whatever I want. That's about it. The navigation system, who was the one who said that her goal wasn't to sleep with others? Master, you're so shameless that even I'm scared. Why? Are you stunned by my handsomeness? Bojo watched as the navigation system fluctuated. She patted the Lamborghini. Calm down, do a good job. The navigation system was cold. Isn't it just sleeping with someone? It's simple. Chinamo entered the hall. He didn't know how someone was thinking about sleeping with him. There were some things he told himself not to care about, but he couldn't help thinking about. Why was she able to have absolute trust in that person? She couldn't do it in front of him. Childhood sweetheart, these 4 words. In the past, he didn't think much of it. But now, it was an eyesore. Even the restlessness from receiving the gift was suppressed. After all, he was a kidnapped person. There were some things he had to pay attention to. After Chin Mo thought it through, he sat on the wooden chair beside the dining table. He was indeed under house arrest. He didn't have a phone or any other means of communication. There didn't seem to be anything in this castle. Besides the Lamborghini that only Bojo could drive, there weren't any other means of transportation. This place could be considered isolated from the rest of the world. That fellow had been living here all along. Chin Mo stood up and walked to the bookshelf. Indeed, it was different from when he was at the Fu family's house. There weren't books like Overbearing CEO Falls in Love with Me. Instead, there were books about computers and medicine. Of course, there were also some foreign classics. There was a complete set of the Sherlock Holmes series and more detective reasoning books. Chin Mo understood that a person's anti-reconnaissance ability had to go through later stages of training. Now, he also understood why the police couldn't do anything to Z. Because when your opponent knew you better than you definitely wouldn't be able to catch her. Chin Mo's gaze swept across the books. He flipped open one of them. After reading 2 pages, he put it down. The fastest way to understand a person was to see what kind of books this person read and what kind of people he interacted with. Z never interacted with anyone. When he came here, Chin Mo realized that there was only the old butler. Moreover, judging from the old butler's surgical technique, he was meticulous and had a strong sense of observation. When Chin Mo did things, he had always been thorough. He was also calculating the time so that no one would discover his current actions. But when Chin Mo flipped to the 3rd book, his gaze paused. He completely forgot about the time. Because he saw a photo. It was placed on the bookshelf. It was an old photo. Chapter 1105. In the photo was a little girl around 4 years old. She had soft black hair, clear eyes, and a face that looked like it wanted to be pinched. From the bridge of her nose to her mouth, she was delicate and pleasing to the eye. She also had a naive look. Logically speaking, with such looks, she should be very obedient. However, her movements looked like she was climbing a wall. One of her short legs had already stepped on a tree branch. It was a little like a little tyrant had run out, full of arrogance and domineeringness. That posture really made it seem like no one could stop her pace. The photo was probably taken secretly. Otherwise, the little girl wouldn't have turned around. Her round eyes were looking somewhere, and her eyelashes were long and black. It was probably a group photo. He could vaguely see another person in the photo. Below the photo, half an arm and a pair of hands could be seen. The hands were also very small. But even so, the observant Almighty Chin could tell that it was a boy's hands. Boy, Chin Mo's fingers tightened. He was about to put the photo back. An old voice with a low laugh came into his ears. That was when young Lord was young. When she was young Lord wasn't as obedient as she is now. She always played with Louis next door. She didn't listen to anyone and liked to climb walls. She even climbed secretly. This was her climbing the wall next door. Louis found out and asked her to come down. Speaking up to this point, the old butler shook his head, a doting smile on his face. Unfortunately, young mistress was too young back then and didn't want to jump down directly. Luckily, Louis told her to jump, and he caught her from below. Master was the one who took the picture, but unfortunately, Louis wasn't there. Chin Mo took another look at the photo. The little boy was wearing a black suit. Even though only his hands were exposed, it was enough to tell that he liked to dress up since he was young. Louis. American. He's Chinese. His English name is Louis. The old butler smiled and said, I wasn't around at that time. Everything I heard was from others. When young mistress first came here, she always talked about her little friend. Sometimes, when she ate something good, she would say that it would be great if her pet was here. Later on, young mistress did many things and got into trouble, so her personality became like this. The old butler's eyes darkened as he reminisced. So, if young Master Chin wants to see something, you can ask me directly. According to young mistress, she will send you back once your hand recovers. I hope young Master Chin won't do anything to hurt young mistress. This sentence was very obvious. In reality, the old butler knew that it was impossible for young Master Chin not to know that young Master Chin had been investigating her ever since he came in. But since she didn't say anything, he pretended that nothing had happened. However, if some things were known by outsiders, the young master's safety would not be guaranteed. From the old butler's point of view, he would definitely be wary of Chin Mo. However, no one knew. Almighty Chin's thoughts were all on that photo. Whether it was the meaning expressed in the photo or the old butler's description. Chin Mo was very clear. This Louis was very important to someone. Chapter 1106. That was why that person had stopped after watching Hoshino's competition video. Every time that person glanced up at Hoshino, there was a strong sense of connection. He told himself not to be bothered. But it felt as though there was a huge rock pressing down on his chest. Even lifting his hand to place the photo back in its original position would affect his heart. It was as though he had returned to that day. When they had sparred at the plaza, a BMW Tomahawk had appeared and taken her away. That trust and cooperation. He had thought that it was only between them. But now, there was a person who appeared in her life one step earlier than him. It was a reality that couldn't be changed. It seemed as though there was nothing he could do. Chin Mo returned to his original position. His side profile didn't look the slightest bit emotional, noble and handsome. Even the curve of his chin was perfect. Chin Mo knew that this elder was giving him a warning. Even though he knew it wasn't possible. But he would still think about it. If only he had been the first person to appear in her life. If only he had been the one to carry her down from the wall in the photo. Chin Mo, who had always been known for his rationality, had actually used the word if. The last ray of light disappeared. Before dinner started, candles were lit on the dining table. The silver cutlery was placed on the table, reflecting the gentle light. Bojo felt that this was the first time she was hosting the Almighty at home. Romance couldn't be lacking. Since there weren't any roses, she had plucked a lot of wild roses from outside. Chin Mo glanced at her but didn't say a word. Bojo sat down, arching a brow. What was wrong with that? She turned back to look at Grandfather Butler, who had a faint smile on his face. She glanced up, sweeping a glance at the bookshelf. She had a rough idea of what had happened. Bojo remained silent for a moment before walking to the side to grab a small laptop. She inserted the USB drive and opened one of the documents. Then she turned the screen. This is the recent case on Fifth Avenue. The police aren't able to find any leads since they don't have any tools. Especially the last person, he seemed to be lying in the bathtub, drowning if he didn't come out. At first, I suspected it was deep hypnosis, but then I saw this. Bojo changed the photo. Needle, these are probably drug addicts. Qin Mo looked up at the youngster in front of him. Bo Jiu chuckled. I know Brother Mo doesn't wish to speak to me now since my identity is known and I even kidnapped you. But I don't wish to see the maiden sacrifice happen, and neither does Brother Mo regarding this matter. I can provide you with some information. Besides, I need your analysis. What kind of person do you think the culprit is? Qin Mo replied, it doesn't matter who the culprit is. What's important is that the culprit will do it again. We have to find the similarity between these few people to deduce the next culprit. Common point. They are all Chinese. Bo Jiu couldn't see anything from the photos. I'll check later. MMH, Qin Mo replied absent-mindedly, swirling the wine glass in his hand. Even his voice sounded faint. Chapter 1107. Bo Jiu couldn't change this. That was her way of doing things. For a long time, she couldn't seem to remember the Almighty. At that time, she almost went down the wrong path. She only understood when she lost someone important to her. In this world, there were too many people who couldn't tell right from wrong. They couldn't stand the fact that a person was serious and allowed the criminal to commit the crime again. They didn't care who was hurt because they weren't the one being hurt. They didn't understand the torment of saying it but not saying it out loud. They didn't understand what it felt like to be trampled on after being hurt. When a person did something wrong, no matter how big the matter was, as long as they showed weakness, they would be comforted. That shouldn't be the case. Who was the real weak one? They were the ones who were persecuted and couldn't explain themselves. Many people couldn't afford to be tormented, but they did it regardless of the cost. They wanted fairness. Many accomplices trampled on this fairness, making it impossible for it to raise its head. Even though there was the law, it wasn't the strongest weapon. Hence, she chose to use this method to expose some things. At the very least, when a girl was bullied, she would have the courage to say no. That way, the person who liked to lie on her back wouldn't leave just like that. At the very least, after a mother defended her daughter's rights, she would receive the compensation she deserved. She wouldn't have to go through so many trials and only receive malice. The real culprit had gotten away scot-free, and nothing had happened to him. In the past, Bo Jiu had the thought of changing. But now, she wouldn't give up this method for anyone, even if it was that person she really, really wanted. Both of them didn't speak. The atmosphere at the dining table wasn't good either. No matter how beautiful the roses were, it didn't ease the tension between them. Even in the castle, there was silence. The old butler stood at the side, wearing white gloves. He wiped the transparent wine glass, his eyes half-lidded. Then he walked over with a bottle of red wine, his voice old but natural. Young Master Qin is very interested in your childhood. Young lord, maybe you can have a chat. Qin Mo frowned, not saying a word. Bo Jiu glanced up. Childhood? Yes. The old butler said in English. Young Master Qin looked at the photo on the bookshelf for a long time. You can tell young Master Qin about you and Louis. Bo Jiu coughed lightly before replying, nothing much. Young master, are you shy? The old steward pushed up his glasses and observed the expressionless young master of the Qin family, whose hand paused in picking up the wine glass. He continued, then I'll go get the diary you wrote back then. It'll be more convenient than what you're saying now. Bo Jiu, what happened to Grandpa Butler? He seemed to always mention her childhood. However, if the Almighty really saw the diary, would he remember something? The old butler was a man of action. After a short while, he brought over an aged book and passed it to Qin Mo. Young Master Qin, you must be curious about our young lord. Her personality and childhood experiences are all in this book. You can take a look. Chapter 1108. But right now, he didn't want to see how close she had been to her childhood sweetheart. He had always been polite, even when it came to rejecting someone. I'm not interested. With that, he wiped his mouth with a napkin and stood up. Also, thank you for your hospitality today. I'm full, I'll be heading upstairs. Boggio glanced over at the plate with the broccoli on it and the empty wine glass. How could he be full after just one bite? The old butler chuckled. I won't force young Master Chin, please. Boggio watched the scene, feeling as though there was a deeper meaning behind Grandfather Butler's smile. She didn't stay idle, she couldn't let the Almighty leave just like that. She had to continue attacking. Otherwise, her romantic confession would be a waste of time. Boggio arched a brow, placing the wine glass and steak on the table. She smiled. I'm going to eat in the bedroom. The old butler wasn't going to interfere, but there was one thing he could remind her. Young lord, a girl shouldn't be too proactive. All right. Boggio took a moment before adding, but I have to feed the Almighty something. I'll come down after he finishes this plate. The old housekeeper finally understood what it felt like to raise a child for someone else after taking care of him for the day. He let out a long sigh. Young lord, you don't have to feel guilty towards young Master Chin since you will let him go. It's not just about the kidnapping. Boggio chuckled, carrying the plate upstairs. She didn't tell Grandfather Butler that she had been the one who owed him from the start. When she had been young, her father hadn't been around and she had been allowed to play by herself. Basically, he had been the one to raise her. He knew that she liked to eat and would always carry snacks in his pocket. Even during the winter, when he liked to wear a suit and attend various business meetings with Grandfather and he would bring her along. When he didn't bring her along, he must have been angry because she had run out to play with others and dirted her hands. After all, the Almighty had been a clean freak since young. Or rather, it had been worse when he had been young. That day, he didn't take her out, and she wanted to sleep in his bed, so she climbed the wall. She didn't expect him to block her. Boggio could still remember the cold little boy standing there helplessly. Little Boggio, are you an idiot? Come down, I'll catch you. Now that she thought about it, the Almighty had done everything he had promised her. At that time, she was always pestering him. Every time, she would rely on the fact that he wouldn't really get angry and ask him not to return to China. Because she would miss him. That year, the Almighty was supposed to go back for the Spring Festival, but after hearing what she said, he didn't leave. Instead, he hugged her and asked her to stick the Spring Festival couplets on the door frame. He told her that this was a Chinese custom and even picked up dumplings for her to eat. At that time, she was really happy, thinking that the two of them would always be like this. Unexpectedly, she was the first to leave after that. Even if her imagination wasn't very rich, she could roughly understand the feeling of being left behind. She was the one who owed him. She didn't even keep her promise, yet she kept asking him to stay. Boggio caressed the photo. There was a sweetness in the depths of her heart, but it was also a little bitter. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.